Ladies and gentlemen, we're going to get started. This is our Monday, May 6, 2019 council session. Since we are in the middle of budget, we now do have council sessions on Monday. And this Monday is a very special one because we're going to kick off our morning with a recognition and a celebration of our Asian American Pacific Islander Heritage Month. Today, we are paying tribute to the generations of Asians and Pacific Islanders who have enriched the United States history, contributed so much, and are instrumental in its future success. Like most commemorative months, Asian Pacific American Heritage Month originated with Congress, which passed a resolution in 1978 proclaiming Asian Pacific American Heritage Week, which became a month-long commemoration in 1992. The month of May was chosen because two important anniversaries fall during this time: the arrival of the first Japanese immigrants in the United States on May 7, 1843, and the completion of the Transcontinental Railroad by many Chinese laborers on May 10, 1869. The majority of the workers who laid the tracks were Chinese immigrants. The AAPI community encompasses a large and diverse group of ethnicities, backgrounds, experiences, and people. And we are very proud that nearly 15% of our county's population are Asian Pacific Islander Americans. They also make up one of the fastest growing racial groups in the nation. Like most other groups of color and immigrant communities, the AAPI also experience unique challenges in our county's racial landscape. And now more than ever, as the county is engaging in our racial equity and social justice work, it is important to work together as our experiences and struggles are more similar than not. Meaningful involvement from all communities, especially our young voices, in the county is essential to tackle issues related to equity. And as we are about to watch in the video prepared by our AAPI liaison, young leaders from AAPI community are stepping up and contributing to this dialogue and work. And now we will watch the video.
Eliminating the achievement gap, providing equal access and opportunity to resources, achieving racial equity. The Montgomery County Council is dedicated to these goals to improve the lives of all county residents. Council President Nancy Navarro is leading the discussion on racial equity. In January, she hosted a training session conducted by the Racial Equity Institute for more than 45 county leaders to proactively understand and address racial inequities facing our communities. In March, residents had the chance to voice their own ideas on how to eliminate racial disparities at a town hall meeting held in the Civic Building in downtown Silver Spring. No voice will be left out, including the youth. A racial equity forum was held for students specifically in April at Gaithersburg High School. In celebration of Asian Pacific American Heritage Month, we asked several Asian American youth to tell us how they experience racial inequity and their visions for a more racially equal society. According to the Urban Institute for Montgomery County, Asian American households have the second highest average income with $131,000 compared to $160,000 for white households. When it comes to college education, 81% of Asians have some college compared to 86 to 88% of whites and native-born people. Statistically, Asian Americans enjoy high rates of completing higher education, employment, income, and home ownership. This often leads to the model minority stereotype being applied to Asian Americans. This, in turn, can create unseen pressures on our young Asian population.
There's claims that Asians have privilege in America and in society, which is personally I disagree with, but I can see the reason behind it looking at like academic statistics. And I think it's a very touchy subject that has a lot of complexity behind it, but I think it puts Asians at a difficult position, and when we're trying to talk about some of our issues or that we face, that we kind of feel like we're not allowed to talk about them because, one, they might not be as difficult as other minorities might face, or two, because economically, statistically, we're more privileged.
As Asian American students, their accomplishments, and speaking for myself too, are often overlooked. It's not like uncommon to hear, oh, he did well on that test because he's Asian, rather than because he works hard, because he gets his work done.
in America, we don't have many North Koreans. We only have 270, and I'm like one of the 15 people in DC area. So if I do something very stupid or very bad thing, then it's very easy to spread word out in the community, and it affects all North Koreans.
Even though Asian Americans are considered highly successful by many measures, this does not mean they shouldn't fight for racial equity.
I think our county is making a lot of active attempts to achieve racial equity, but I think we still have a lot of work to do, a lot of groundwater work to do to ensure that no matter what background you come from, you have the same chance to be happy and successful here in Montgomery County.
I remember thinking about how our rights came about, and really it came from the Black movement and how they got their civil rights, and they really set the precedence for equality in all of America. And it's important for us to really recognize that as minorities, you really have to stand together. And even though we may all be facing different struggles, it doesn't mean that they're all entirely separate, and there's really connection between them, and that as minorities, we ought to just stand together.
So racial equality and equity does mean everybody. So it's not just Asian Americans advocating for Asian American issues. It's really just giving everyone the opportunity to perform well and succeed.
As our young students prepare to enter the workforce in the near future, they have plenty of ideas for our county lawmakers on how to achieve racial equity.
In education, we also think about having a curriculum that reflects the students' background and hiring a workforce that is reflective of the immense diversity that Montgomery County has.
Because the curriculum in Montgomery County, too, tends to be pretty Eurocentric, right? And this really leaves out and omits other cultures and doesn't allow every student to relate to the curriculum. So changing this curriculum will immediately benefit other students of other cultures besides this Eurocentric curriculum.
I think cultural inclusivity and sensitivity is always a good idea. For example, training for teachers or staff members to learn about other cultures or the complexities behind racial equity.
Growing up in Montgomery County, these students are grateful their local government is making everyone feel like they have a place at the table.
I really appreciate to the government that actually thinks about those foreigners and ethnic groups and trying to provide it like an equal like opportunity for everyone.
One of the first things I say when I introduce myself is that I grew up in one of the most diverse communities in this nation. I think it's something that I personally pride myself on every day.
Growing up, I was lucky to be in Montgomery County where it's diverse, and I never felt isolated because of things I couldn't control, like my race.
Using these ideas brought forth by our residents, young and old, Council President Navarro will work with her council colleagues to introduce and enact equity policy legislation this fall.
I want to thank Crystal Park for that amazing video, and now we're going to present some awards and a proclamation. So first, let me invite Ms. Ananya Tadikonda and Mr. Arvin Kim to come forward so I can present a special token of appreciation for their extraordinary leadership as amazing young leaders in our county. You can stay here. I do want to acknowledge Amanda Chu and also Grace Joe, who couldn't be here, but they also will have some awards that we will send their way. But really, truly, This is definitely the face of Montgomery County's future. This is definitely the face of those young leaders who are about doing extraordinary things and really taking the baton from many of us who have worked so hard to lay the path. They are blazing that trail, and I am so grateful for everything that you have done here in Montgomery County and will continue to do as you, of course, go off to college and other things that will come in the future. We want you back, obviously, and we want you very well connected because we truly do need you here. So thank you again, and another round of applause for these amazing leaders. All right, so now let's continue the celebration, and I would like to invite all the members of the AAPI community to come forth. We're going to have a proclamation, and you guys stay here because are part of this celebration. Okay, we're all going to gather. And make a nice little circle back here. Okay. Everybody can see everybody? Oh, this way as well. Okay. There's more space on this side as well, so we can all see each other.
Sideways. Everybody
Right.
sideways. Maybe we should invite
All
all
right.
of them. Come on, baby.
All right, so let's do the proclamation, and then we will definitely make sure everybody is in the ceremonial photo at the end. The County Council of Montgomery County, Maryland proclamation, whereas Asian American and Pacific Islander Heritage Month is recognized nationally throughout the month of May and celebrates the contributions that generations of Asian Americans and Pacific Islanders have made to American history, society, and culture. And whereas residents of Asian Pacific heritage come from all parts of Asia and the Pacific islands of Melanesia, Micronesia, and Polynesia, and whereas Asian American and Pacific Islander Heritage Month honors the perseverance of those who courageously reach for their hopes and dreams in a new land and celebrates the important impact that these community members have made on our nation. And whereas in commemorating this month, tribute is paid to all in the Asian American and Pacific Islander communities who worked for more opportunities and better lives for future generations. And whereas more than 161,600 county residents identify themselves as Asian Americans or Pacific Islander, which represents more than 15% of our population, and approximately 70% of these residents are foreign-born. And whereas most Asian Pacific Americans living in our county trace their ancestries to China, India, Korea, the Philippines, and Vietnam. And whereas as one of the most culturally diverse groups in our county, Asian Americans and Pacific Islanders remind us that while we come from different backgrounds, we are all united in our ongoing efforts to make Montgomery County an outstanding community in which to live, work, and raise a family. And whereas together we recommit ourselves to embracing the diversity that enriches our county and to ensuring that all people have equal chance to succeed. Now, therefore, be it resolved that the County Council of Montgomery County, Maryland hereby recognizes May 2019 as Asian American and Pacific Islander Heritage Month, signed on the 6th of May in the year of 2019, signed by Nancy Navarro, myself, Council President. And I'm going to present this proclamation to Judge Pak.
Yeah.
Yes. Now, we do have, I believe we do have proclamations for others as well, right? Okay, so we're going to I'll turn it over to Judge Pak to make some remarks, and then you'll have some other members of the group who will also make some remarks.
I want to first mention some of the leaders here. Mr. Mukherjee from the AICS and the Mr. James Han from the League of Korean Americans and the Christina Poi from the Governor's Affairs, on Asian American Affairs, and the Dr. Hyun-suk Choi from the Youngnam Foundation, and Mr. Choi from the Korean American Senior Citizens Association, and Senator Susan Lee, and the Mr. Becky Singh, former chair of the Sikh Temple in Silver Spring, and Dr. Lee from CCACC, Executive Director, and the Matthew Lee, Democratic Central Committee member and Government Contracting Alliance, and the Martin Han, and the we have Dr. Nimping Fang from the Northwestern Chinese American Association, Linda Han from the Global Han in Hyundai, and Stan Tsai from the OCA-DC co-chair, and Dr. John Lu from the Asian American Chamber of Commerce, and the Mr. Jason, president of the Coordination Council of Chinese American Associations, and the the adult trend from the Vietnamese community service, and the Dr. Vo Son from the Union of Chinese American Professional Associations, and Dr. Heng Lu from the Chinese American Alumni Association, and the those they are the top leaders of the Asian American communities, and I'd like to have representatives from each community speak for about 30 seconds. And so I'd like to first invite from the Chinese American community, Dr. Jason.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you very much, and I'm so glad to be here and to work with all the community and to celebrate the Asian Pacific Islander and Heritage Month. I'm new here. I'm the current my second term of the CCCAA, which is the Coordinating Council of Chinese American Associations. In our umbrella, we covered 36 hometown associations from all over China. So I'm being here ready to work together with the council and with the PAC and with the Nancy to reach out to the Chinese communities, help the citizens and also new immigrants, to give them help to make their life easier to live in this great county. And thank you very much.
Mr. Tran from the Vietnamese American community.
Thank you very much for the opportunity to speak on behalf of Vietnamese community. I really appreciate Montgomery County leaders and all of the partners. We have the event today to celebrate our Asian Heritage Month. I would like to tell my people in my community, we work harder and contribute more to build a healthy and thrift county of Montgomery County. Thank you.
And Mr. Betty Singh from the South Asian and Indian American community.
We thank you, Nancy Navarro, and all the council members giving us a time here. And on behalf of the Sikh community and Asian American, we really appreciate this. Is great that we need to keep it up for the next years to come. Thank you very much.
And Matthew Lee from the Korean American community.
Good morning. Thank you so much to President Nancy, and our 8 other council members have been working with them. They are always champion for the AAPI community. And you saw the Judge Pak, he's the godfather of AAPI community. Remember, everybody's, right? And you know the champion of Senator Susan Lee. I really thank you so much. And then having Alvin Kim, like a young, Korean American, young Asian Americans be, part of us and contributing, for the educationally and economically and culturally, we're going to be a rich community in the Montgomery County. And I want to thank you so much. Thanks.
And the Senator Susan Lee.
Okay, 30
seconds.
Absolutely.
Someone take time.
Okay.
Thank you so much. Nancy, thank you so much for doing this, and also your county council colleagues here. Thank you for recognizing our fast-growing Asian American Pacific Islander community. This is an important month for us because we've been in this country for a long time, but our contributions have not been recognized, but they are now with this month. And I think it's important that we be an inclusive community and state, and we are. And Montgomery County is one of the most diverse and most educated and most informed and engaged, the best county in Maryland. Don't you think, guys, right? Yeah, because we are like this. And I'd like to give a shout out to our kids here, too. Weren't they wonderful? Can we give them a hand, too?
Yeah.
I know we're in good hands now. They are our future. They are our hope. And I thank you, everyone, for coming here today. Happy Asian American Pacific Islander Heritage Month. Thank you.
Yes.
I just want to thank our County Council President Nancy Navarro. She helped organize this event with the other county council members, and I think what makes Montgomery County is because we have leaders like Nancy Navarro and other county leaders who understands the diversity is important and inclusive community is important, and they understand we all make significant contribution to the good of our county, state, and our nation. And thank you again,
Absolutely.
Council President.
Absolutely. Thank you, Judge Fox. Thank you. I also want to acknowledge Shruti Bhatnagar, who is here and has joined us. But as you heard, we do have the godfather of the AAPI community and the godmother, Senator Susan Lee, who are doing just extraordinary things in our community, and it's just really heartwarming, especially when you try to watch the news and realize that day in and day out, what we are seeing is just an absolute breakdown of what I consider to be the hijacking of truth and lack of empathy and lack of understanding. And I think that we do live in an extraordinary community where here what you see present is a snapshot of who we are and what we plan to continue to do together in order to hopefully be a role model to so many other jurisdictions that somehow don't seem to be able to get it together when it comes to this issue of just inclusiveness, tolerance, and respect. So it is really humbling for me to stand here and really acknowledge the hard work of all of those present, and as well as all of those who are out there in our community today. So with that, we're going to take the ceremonial photo, and I'm going to ask my colleagues if they can please stand, because I know it's going to be kind of tough to be over here, but they're all very tall, so they can all fit. All right, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to continue with our council session. The first item is the Washington Suburban Sanitary Commission. If those who are here from WSSC can please come to the table. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you. Good morning. Good morning. So this is a work session on the Washington Suburban Commission proposed FY20 operating budget. We do have a committee recommendation of 3-0, and I welcome those of you who are here. We do have Ms. Carla Reed, General Manager, CEO. We do have Mr. Dennis here, who is a WSSC Commissioner, Mr. Bayonet, who is here as well, Commissioner, as well as Mr. Joe Beach, Deputy General Manager, and others who are here available for the session. I will first turn it over to the chair of our T&E committee, Councilmember Hucker, who can share with us what has been discussed. And then we will have Ms. Reed perhaps make some remarks and Mr. Levchenko walk us through the packet in terms of what are the straw votes that we need to take, reminding everybody that the final vote takes place this Thursday when we meet as bi-county leaders with Prince George's County. Councilmember Hucker.
Oh, thank you, Madam Chair. I'll be brief and turn it over to our guest and Mr. Levchenko, but the committee should know, you know, we were here for a little bit of testimony on the budget previously. Our terrific staff, Keith Levchenko, did some great analysis of how WSSC rates match up against surrounding jurisdictions. We also you know, we're reminded of how WSSC has moved forward delivering high quality and safe water for us for 100 years without a violation. And after discussion, we approved we recommended approval of the proposed operating budget with the 5% rate increase, in large part due to their continued necessary infrastructure upgrades and the considerable debt service that remains a part of their budget and will be for quite a while. That is in agreement with both staff and county executive's recommendation. We also agreed with the previously approved system development charge, which is the charge paid by new users, and we expressed strong support for the newly hired executive general and the additional funding so he and his team can get right to work. So with that, let me turn it back to you and Mr. Levchenko or Ms. Reed.
Okay, Ms. Reed.
Good morning, President Navarro, Vice President Katz, Chair Hucker, and esteemed council members. As you know, I'm Carla Reed, and I'm the General Manager, CEO of WSSC, for the record. President Navarro, I think you outlined everyone who's here, except for a couple people, so I will just identify them from our team, our CFO, Patty Callahan, and our Budget Director, Ms. Letitia Carolina Powell. We are so pleased to be here today to talk about our FY20 proposed budget, and we've been through quite a process, as Chair Hucker said, so we would just entertain any questions you have after Keith Levchenko goes through his packet.
Thank you. And before we do that, would any of the commissioners or both like to make any remarks? Commissioner Bayonet or Dennis? No? Okay, so we're going to go straight to Mr. Levchenko.
Sure, and I'm intending to really do a fairly high-level discussion, and if committee council members have any questions, we can certainly get into the nitty-gritty here. We have everyone here that's needed to answer questions. On the cover page of the packet was intended to cover the key points. I did want to emphasize the operating budget numbers, which appear in the middle on the cover sheet. We're looking at an $817.4 million proposed FY20 budget and 1,776 full-time equivalent positions in WSSC. The budget increase reflected in that is shown below at 4.6%, with no increase in full-time positions. I did want to note, and this was alluded to from Mr. Hucker's discussion of debt service, if you remove the debt service increase from this equation, the FY20 WCC budget is increasing 2.1%. So that gives you an idea of the impact of debt service on the budget. And then also another specific charge that WCC has to pay to DC Water is the regional sewage disposal payment based on actual flows into the Blue Plains facility. And those are essentially fixed by formula as well. So if you remove those costs from this equation, then the WCC budget, which is, at least in the short term, more under control of WSSC, is increasing 1.1%. So this is a pretty tight budget, I think, by any definition. And I think I tried to emphasize that with the committee as we went through it, and we did get into some more details about what's included in that and what is not included in that. Also, I noted below some of the major discussion points. And the one thing I did want to note with regard to the schedule is, as Ms. Navarro noted, we have the bi-county meeting this Thursday to go over and resolve any differences. Right now, there is one difference Mr. Hucker alluded to with regard to the Inspector General funding. The Prince George's Transportation Infrastructure, Energy and Environment Committee, their version of our T&E committee, was recommending less funding for the Inspector General than was proposed by $500,000. Our committee was supportive of that increase. We will work with Prince George's between now and Thursday to see if we can come to agreement on that. So stay tuned on that. But right now, that is the only difference. The Prince George's Committee was supportive of the rate increase and the other expenditures and assumptions in the budget. So that's the only discussion point between now and Thursday that we have to resolve. Several other issues I'll just point out quickly. Within the proposed budget, WSSC for the second year has put together a long-range financial plan similar to what the county does, to try to show how the dollars will be balanced across the next 6 years, looking at both revenues and expenditures. And staff will say that compared to last year, the numbers are looking a little bit better in terms of the undetermined reductions that would be needed to meet those numbers. It does assume rate increases across the next 6 years, once again, primarily because of debt service. So we are still struggling with that, and we will be looking, as we have the last couple of years, on the CIP side to identify those areas where we can economize where possible without jeopardizing or pushing expenditures to the future unnecessarily. But that is one area where we will have to keep working because debt service is close to 40% of their proposed budget in terms of expenditures. So that's, while a significant debt service is expected in a utility like WSSC, there has been a long time policy of trying to keep it below 40%. So we're nudging right up there. So that is something that we are going to be focusing on or continue to focus on over the next couple of years. And the operating side, WC can speak to what they're looking to try to do, which is primarily live within what they've got and try to, for those areas where they need improvements, try to find those resources within their existing budget, which is what they're primarily doing in this budget. So we're supportive of that effort, and they can certainly speak to a lot of those cost savings and cost avoidance efforts that they're pursuing. Another thing I wanted to note, this is something the council works on with the agencies and departments, is employee compensation. And staff did note for the committee that the compensation assumed in the proposed budget, staff felt was comparable to what we were looking at for the Montgomery County office worker and non-public safety employee population, with the exception of the deferred step issue that's specific to Montgomery County. That's not something that WSSC is pursuing, but if you take that out of the equation, the numbers in terms of the COLA and the merits or increments, as we call them, are comparable, and staff felt comfortable that we were close enough to approve that. So that's another area where the committee was supportive. With that, I guess if the council has any specific questions, I think we have the folks here at the table that can answer those questions or get into more detail on any of these issues.
Great, thank you. Councilmember Rice.
Well, thank you very much, Madam President, and thank you to WSSC for continuing to be a partner with us when it comes to ensuring that our folks in the community can depend on safe water. I was troubled recently by a tweet that I saw that came across that mentioned in the context of pesticides and the pesticide ban in Montgomery County that somehow they thought that WSSC did not filter out pesticides. Would WSSC like to correct on the record what it is that WSSC does when it comes to pesticides in our water to ensure our public the confidence that in fact those pesticides are not transmitted back into drinking water?
Thank you, Councilmember Rice. We have joining us at the table our Deputy General Manager for Operations, who spent several years working in the plants, coming up through the ranks of WSSC, and so I'm going to let him answer firsthand. Thank you.
Good morning. I'm Jay Price for the record. Some of the chemicals that you do go through the water are not removed by the plants. Others are. So it really depends upon the chemical. There's so many out there.
Well, when it comes to those contaminants that are registered by USPA or US EPA, those have always been ones in which WSSC has been below the required levels that need to be in its history, from what I understand. Is that not correct?
That is correct. We've been 100% for 101 years now. We've always met or exceeded our EPA standards.
Excellent. And I think it's just important for us in the context of our community who depends on WSSC for safe drinking water to make sure that we're correcting those things that are out there floating around in the public. I don't want people to get the wrong idea about the huge investment that we have in WSSC when it comes to the safety of our drinking water. I also just wanted to close by thanking you for being a partner with us when it comes to working with areas that we know are challenged when it comes to failing septic systems and continuing to partner with the county in trying to make sure that we're not damaging our groundwater, understanding that these failing septic systems have tremendous impacts on our environment as well as on the health and safety of our overall residents. I know that there continue to be places identified, and would just ask that you continue to work with us in those particular areas to make sure that we're doing all we can to not only make sure that our environment is protected, but the health and welfare of our communities is as well. So thank you very much for your partnership. Thank you, Madam President.
Thank you. Okay, so I don't see any other lights. We do have a committee recommendation to concur with WSSC to maintain system development charge rates for FY20 at current approved levels, but to increase the maximum chargeable rate. The charge could be increased in the future. By a CPI adjustment, 1.5% is allowed for under state law, and also to approve the FY20 WSSC operating budget as proposed by WSSC and as recommended by the county executive. These are straw votes. All those in favor, please raise your hand. And that is unanimous. Thank you very much for being here.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for all your work.
Our pleasure.
Okay, so we are now on to item number 2 on our agenda, and this is the Maryland National Capital Park and Planning Commission budget. And everybody's making their way. Yeah. Morning. Good morning. We do have Mr. Casey Anderson, Chair of the Montgomery County Planning Board. We have Ms. Wright, Director of the Planning Department, Mr. Riley, Director of Parks Department. I see here on my list Suchi Vera, Chief Management Services, Park Department, Nancy Steen, Budget Manager, Parks Department, and John Kroll, Corporate Budget Manager, Central Administrative Services. Those are the people on my list. So with this, Ms. Dunn, I know that you've prepared a packet. I want to thank you for a very thorough packet. I will first turn it over to the chair of the Fed Committee, Councilmember Reamer, to highlight the committee's recommendation, and then we'll turn it over to Mr. Anderson and Mr. Riley for any other comments, and then Ms. Dunn will walk us through our decision points.
Thank you very much, Council President Navarro. So we worked through the budget. The framework was challenging because the request from the commission was not met in the executive's recommendation. It was about, the executive's recommendation was about $4 million, I think, below the requested level. And so Park and Planning had a real challenge to figure out how to deal with a lower recommended budget than they had expected. And so they were able to reorder priorities and absorb a couple $1 million, I think about $3 million worth of reduced funding levels. But there were some areas that the commission just felt there was nowhere to go, and they're coming to request the council's support for a handful of necessary, very crucial funding priorities in both the parks and the planning side. Pam will get us into the details of it, but I'll just say overarching that unfortunately, the move to Wheaton, the headquarters move, which was all known and the county has been working on, the budget for parks and planning does not include the headquarters does not fund the parks all of the parks and planning's expenses. And it was always understood that that would be the case, but unfortunately, it's not. So Parks and Planning have had to ask us for additional supplementary funds to support their costs for equipment, computer equipment, furniture, basic things that are not otherwise funded in the capital budget, but important and necessary. We'll get into this in a bit, but I want to highlight on the reconciliation list for parks, there's a lot of money for ball fields, and continuing to expand and strengthen this tremendous program that we have going now to renovate natural grass ball fields, and to then, once we renovate them, roll them into a maintenance program where they can be maintained successfully because they're built correctly. And this is one of the real highlights of the last several years of park priorities, is building a world-class grass maintenance program. And there's always controversies about the use of synthetic turf for playing surfaces. And it certainly is my feeling that synthetic turf is something that you only want to use when it's the only option. And there are cases where the use of a field is so round the clock and through all kinds of weather that you don't have an alternative. You need some kind of synthetic surface. But we've banned tire crumb. We don't use tire crumb in any new fields. We are very careful about what kind of synthetic fields we use. But that's really the exception to the rule. The rule should be grass. And so the program that we're building here is to support grass. And in order to do that, we need equipment and we need personnel. And we're gradually working our way through all of the fields in the school system that can be brought into the permit program. And we are renovating them. But we also know, and we learned this several years ago when I started to ask questions about the maintenance status of school fields, that there had been an historic agreement for parks to maintain school fields, but it fell through during the recession. And so a few years ago, we had to stop everything and pick that back up and start reinvigorating it. And Mike took that on, and in Casey, we've been funding the expansion of that program now, and we're cycling fields into the program once again, but it's going to take us 20 years, I think you said, or maybe more, to get through all the fields at the pace we're going. So we've got to add funding into this program. And so there's some funding on the reconciliation list for ball field expansions, but we're going to come back. I know the Fed committee really wanted to come back this summer and think about how could we actually get this going so that we're getting through the fields at a faster pace. And in that spirit, several council members, but specifically Juando, Hucker, and Albornoz have asked for additional funding for renovating rec fields. So we have been renovating a lot of school fields, and this would add several rec fields, well, specifically White Oak, but then with the goal of adding in additional rec fields to that cycle. And so that's on the list as Tier 3. And Tier 1 includes, I think it's Tier 1, maybe it's Tier 2, includes some of the necessary infrastructure of ball field renovation, staff and equipment. And if, we need to build the resource in order to take on more fields. So hopefully colleagues will see the connections there. Last comment is on the planning side. We've got some really exciting initiatives here that we're going to be taking up the general plan. First time since the late 60s that the council has taken on the overarching planning framework of this county in a big way. And you'll see around the region, jurisdictions have initiated general plan updates. DC is still working through its update after several years of heavy lifting. And we're taking this on, but we need to do this in a very efficient way. So I really want to appeal to my colleagues now, as we're going to be taking on this general plan. We want to make this a collaboration between the council and the planning board, and to engage council members at the front end of this process, so that there isn't a year and a half process that plays out at the planning board and then it lands here and we're back at square one. Because there's a real risk that if that happens, we're not going to meet the timeline, and then we would be faced with the prospect of taking up the general plan essentially during the 2022 primary election cycle, and there might not be much desire to do that. So if we're going to meet this ambitious goal, we've got to be on an efficient, accelerated timeline, which we could do if we worked with the planning board, I think, in that process. So we're talking about ideas like, could we do hearings together? Could council members do their own engagement process in the general plan update, just so that we're all moving forward at one kind of pace? And if we could all participate, I think that would really lend itself to success, and ensure that this council term, has a real result in this general plan. Because I think none of us want to come out of this council term saying, oops, we couldn't do it. We had to punt it to the next council. With that said, the planning department also wants to add in a vision for 270 and the transit and transportation capacity goals of that corridor, which I think would be a really terrific initiative. There's a lot of ideas about transportation, and it's very timely, of course, with everything that's coming on from the state level. So that has been added, and we're looking at the Silver Spring area as well, and sort of a need to update some of the zoning there. So those are several of the bigger picture items that are on the agenda. And having said that, I'll invite the planning board to make some comments, and then we'll go to Pam to walk through.
Yeah, before
Would you like to do it?
Yeah. Before we do that, though, I do want to acknowledge the work of the GO committee during our work session on the cable fund. We did agree to support restoration of $100,000 transfer from the cable fund to the park fund for the Connected Parks initiative. And I want to point that out because Mr. Mabayani, and I hope I'm pronouncing that right, he has been such a champion within the ITPCC work, as well as just in general when it comes to this issue. And the GO committee has been very supportive of this particular innovative initiative, and he shared with us many of the benefits that this particular initiative has had here in our county, and we feel very good about doing whatever we can to continue to expand that. So it wasn't noted on the packet that it was the GO committee. This was April 22nd, but I wanted to just mention that for the record.
Thank you. It should have been noted. We definitely discussed that at the committee and how much we needed to have access to that cable fund resource. And that fund comes from the fees that people pay on their cable bill.
Right,
and
it does.
Using it for technology is precisely what we should be doing.
Absolutely. All right, so Mr. Anderson?
Thank you, and I'm really very glad you brought that up, President Navarro. I guess, and I'll start there. It's really crucial, I think, to improve public safety in the parks, to get Wi-Fi in more locations, because that will allow us to use cameras or other sensors to monitor activity, especially things that are going on in the parks after dark when they're supposed to be closed, but people are in the parks doing things they shouldn't be, without adding more police officers. So that I'm delighted that you saw fit to add that to the reconciliation list. We really appreciate getting that money out of the cable fund. As Councilmember Reamer had said, the Parks Department request in particular, I think it's critical that we get these items off the reconciliation list in order to make progress on the ball field initiative, and also to operate the parks more efficiently over the long run. You'll notice that there's money that's in this second tier, but is still very important for EAM, which is enterprise asset management that allows us to maintain an accurate inventory of the assets that we have in the parks and their condition, so we can stay on top of maintenance. It's much less expensive if we can get to an asset that is at the end of its useful life before it fails. So for example, if a culvert rots out and collapses, sometimes that can create a major issue with a road, that you would have a major maintenance issue if the culvert collapses and then nobody can drive over that segment of the road because it's now collapsed into a stream crossing. If we can get to that before it becomes a problem, but not before it really needs to be fixed, that can help us to improve we can get more bang for the buck out of the very limited resources that we have just for life cycle replacement of assets and maintenance of those kind of things that start to wear out. And that's not very glamorous. You don't hold a ribbon cutting for an EAM position, but this is really essential, I think, for us to stay on top of technology and to gather data that we can use to inform management decisions that are going to help us deliver a program as efficiently as possible for all the things that people do really care about in the park system. The only other thing I would add is that we did not come back and ask for everything that was not funded by the county executive. We really dug deep to try not to come back here and ask you to put everything back on the reconciliation list. And I think that the Fed committee recognized that. They recognized that the things we asked for are really essential and important to delivering a high-quality program and to continue to have both departments, particularly the Parks Department, move forward. And you've already heard Councilmember Reamer explain that we consider the money for the Wheaton headquarters building for both the Planning Department and the Parks Department to be absolutely essential. We cannot move into the building without this money. It's simply has to be restored in order for us to get into the headquarters, not only for us, but for the other agencies that are going to rely on these building systems being operational on the first day that they move in.
Thank you. I also just wanted to clarify the Wi-Fi in the parks that does not go on the rec list, right? That was a transfer that we made from the cable fund. So yeah, just wanted to clarify that. All right, Ms. Dunn, anybody else wants to make remarks, or are we ready to go into the
I think we're ready to go to the packet.
Okay, Ms. Dunn.
Good morning. So as everyone's mentioned, I'm going to also keep this at a somewhat higher level rather than walk you through every single page of the packet. You've had it, and the committee went through every line of it and has made a lot of decisions. They were unanimous on every decision that they did make. And as was already noted this morning, the budget for Parks and Planning, the MNC PPC, was an increase of 0.8% from what the county executive recommended. So it was also almost $5 million below what they requested. And that's a very big difference, and the Parks and Planning both did a great job. They did go back. They looked at where can we pre-fund some things with savings that we can recognize today. What can we move or shift off of our work program that's not the priority? Where can we find savings? And they found almost $3 million worth. So what you will see when I get to that part of the packet, which is about halfway through, they have listed their items to be considered for reconciliation into tiers. They're actually, for the Park Fund, there are 3 tiers. The first tier is the Wheaton building is the top one priority, and then after that are those positions for ball fields. And then there's a second tier, we'll get into a little more detail with that. And then there is this third tier that was added by the three council members, Councilmember Albornoz, Councilmember Hucker, Councilmember Joando, requesting the money for the White Oak Rec Field renovation. But before we get there, we'll go through just some of the highlights so that the full council is aware of what the committee reviewed. They did review the budget as it relates to the affordability guidelines. We know that compensation is still a little bit of a question in the air because I don't believe at this time that the negotiated contracts had been done either on the park and planning side, and we know that compensation is still an issue at the council level. So that remains a little bit unresolved and will have an impact on their budget. They do have money set aside for a compensation increase, but I don't know that it's at the level, or pretty sure that it's not at the level that's been recommended by the county executive at some of those higher ends. If we move to the park fund, it starts on page 5 of the packet. You will see that the FY20 tax supported funding requested by MNC PPC was at about $101.8 million. Was their request, and the county executive recommended $97.4 million. They had, certain things that are listed on that page that talk about, what are the increases in their budget, operating budget impacts for new programs. Part of that is the Wheaton building. The county executive did support the National Pollution Discharge Elimination System funding, and then there are other known operating commitments. Those are things that, they have inflationary increases, contractual obligations, things that they know will cost. Regardless of what happens, those amounts go up. And then there are program enhancements that they've already talked about today, the enterprise asset management position, the ball fields work, and other things as well. On page 7 is the beginning of the discussion on what are the reductions to meet the executive recommended funding level. You will see that MNC PPC takes the total amount that the budget needs to be reduced, and then they prorate it across parks, planning, and the central administrative services.
Okay, so, sorry, you're on page 8 now?
Page 7 in the middle. It shows you the share of each commission reduction needed to meet the county executive's budget.
Okay.
So for central administrative services, the decrease would be $350,000 plus. Planning department was almost $900,000, and the parks department was just slightly over $4 million.
So that is, if there was no addition, that is the cut that would be needed relative to their request.
Exactly. That's the difference. The county executive is here,
Okay.
and their request was here. But as has been mentioned, the departments did go and look for savings. If you'll turn the page, here we are on page 8, and at the top you will see there's a full chart where the Parks Department has listed out the things where they can find savings. So these are items offered that will not be requested to be restored for $2.3 million. So that gets you a little closer to that difference between the county executive and their prior request, meaning their request has gone down. But they still have a need of about $1.8 million, and those items then are listed in tiers 1 and 2 below. Tier 1 has the essential needs, as was mentioned. The Wheaton headquarters building is number 1, and then basically the ball field, the expanding that program. It is some staff level positions to do inspecting and to provide the organization and management of that program. And then in tier 2, you'll see it is really about infrastructure. It is about keeping up with the system that we have. It is making sure that it is well maintained. It also accounts for inflationary increases and contractual obligations and some IT initiatives. I'm sure they can answer more detailed questions about it, but those are the basic items that are in both of those tiers.
Should we just pause here for a moment and see if there's some questions from council members about, Mr. Rice wanted to.
Mr. Rice, Councilmember Rice.
Just very quickly, so because I heard the council president say that the GO committee had done the transfer, so is the $100,000 subtracted? So is it now 1.696 instead
Correct.
of 1.796?
Yes.
Just wanted to be sure.
Yep.
All right, thank you.
Doesn't that have to be funded also on the reconciliation list? It's a transfer. But it's a transfer from funding that was otherwise going to something else.
The reconciliation list is simply for the tax-supported general fund items. Anything that's funded by another fund, particularly where there's a revenue involved, we don't group together with the items that are competing on the reconciliation list.
It's a decreased transfer to the general fund from the cable fund.
Right. So
there'll be $100,000
I
less
think what
of-
the GO committee did is it decided that it was fine to reduce the balance in the cable
Okay.
fund by 100,000.
It was the
That's what
fund
we did.
balance. Thank you.
Right.
Now that truly is painless. All right.
Yes.
Hopefully. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Much appreciated for your leadership, committee chair.
Can we get a
Council
little more of
President
that?
Nancy Navarro. Thanks for clearing that up, though, actually. That's helpful for all of us to know how these things can work. All right?
So if you turn the page to page 9, that is where you'll have the summary. The committee supported 3-0 the retaining of all of the Tier 1 and Tier 2 priorities for restoration. And if the council supports this restoration of Tiers 1 and 2, it would be a 1.6 or 1.7 million would be added to the reconciliation list for the park fund. But in addition to that, there has been created a Tier 3, which was put forth before the committee from the council members, as mentioned earlier, that would support renovating the ball field at White Oak, that recreation field, which sees a lot of use and is in relatively bad repair right now. So that would increase it slightly. And as also noted, the GO committee did approve the $100,000 transfer from the cable fund.
Yes.
Councilmember Jawando has a question.
Thank you, Madam President. Less of a question, and I want to defer a little bit to my district council member, Hucker, but I'm on the committee. I supported this. We've both been out to see the White Oak field, walked it. I'm glad we're moving in the direction that Councilmember Reamer discussed, to have parks do what you do best and take over the management of the school fields. And I agree, we need to look at an acceleration before my kids graduate from college. And I just, and so we've got that time period. I think we need to move with haste, but also include these rec fields. And I think White Oak would be at top of that list. We've talked about this, Director Riley. And so I want to thank my colleagues, Albernaz and Hucker, for signing on. I would hope that we could get support for this. I think it's in an urgent situation. It's used a lot by a community in East County and there that needs that rec center, needs that field to be operational. And so I think it's at a critical state, just having seen it myself. And so we're talking about equity, and I think it's a good place to start and put a down payment down. So I know we have a lot of other needs. I'm glad we recommended to restore a majority of your funding in other areas so you can continue the work of parks. But I think I see this as just as critical to the rest of that list. So thank you, Council President.
Councilmember Hooker.
Thank you, Madam President. Yes, I think it's all been well said, but I am grateful to my colleagues that are on the memo for supporting this initiative. This is a long-standing sore subject. It's completely in line, as Councilmember Jawando said, with our racial equity lens. This would show we're taking it very seriously. This is a community that is more dependent on public facilities than most places in our county. And it's one of our highest poverty areas, and this field has been substandard for a long time, and it's perfectly appropriate to put it under the purview of parks, since you're in the grass and fields business, and not everybody is, and you do a very good job of it. So I hope everybody can support it. Thank you.
Yeah, I just want to say that I'm obviously very supported. I don't think I was asked to sign on to the letter, but this is a very important facility, and I want to acknowledge actually Councilmember Albornoz with the former hat that he wore, because I remember putting forth funding to extend the hours actually of operation for that particular facility, because it was clear that, especially on Fridays, it was so important to have that access to our young people who would then just kind of hang out in the parking lot. And I think this is another way to add, enhancements to that very important facility that is so nestled in that particular area. So I do appreciate everybody's work on this. Councilmember Reamer and then Councilmember Albornoz.
Thank you very much. The committee supported this addition to the reconciliation list. Appreciate the advocacy from my colleagues. Just want to again say that the Parks Department had to figure out how to reprioritize millions of dollars of their budget requests that they could not get. And they were able to do that. But there were some things that are core to the daily function of the department that they could not figure out how to otherwise provide for. And that's your tier, I think that's really your tier 2 is your less glamorous but day-to-day essential items. Tier 1 is strengthening the ball fields program itself so that we can take on more fields and even succeed with the ones we're taking on now. So I just appeal to my colleagues, please put these all together. Let's do 1, 2, and 3 if we possibly can. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Albornoz.
Thank you. I'm really excited that we're hopefully going to move forward with improving the field at White Oak. For context, White Oak was open in the middle of the recession. We actually delayed the opening of that facility by 6 months because of the challenges we were having fiscally at the time, and the field was a casualty of some very difficult decisions that had to be made at the time. And it was intended to be a passive field, but as we have found with the athletic leagues, and in particular a soccer program that's there are great needs in that community. And so not only do we have to ensure that the facilities and the fields meet up to the standards and can take on the really wonderful use, but we also have to ensure that the programming is in place for there to be on those fields as well. And I'm working with our colleagues in the Office of Legislative Oversight to conduct an analysis of youth sports participation in Montgomery County, because there disproportionately is less participation in communities like White Oak, but ensuring that these fields are up to the standards that we demand all across the entire county is step one. And so I think this is a really good step moving forward. I'm also very excited about the consolidation of different agencies in downtown Wheaton, because I do believe that while there is clearly a one-time cost here to ensure that we transition in an appropriate fashion, I think moving forward, this will actually lead to savings, as the consolidation of agencies under one roof will greatly improve our community as a whole. And I think there's also going to be a pretty substantial economic impact from all of those county employees coming to downtown Wheaton that over time will more than offset this one-time cost on the front end to ensure a smooth transition. So appreciate the Parks Department's efforts, appreciate the Fed Committee's work, and I appreciate the creativity of the GO Committee to free up some additional resources.
Thank you. Councilmember Friedson.
I'll be very brief. I think everything that I was going to say has been said, but just wanted to thank the committee really and the full council for their support of parks, and I'm hopeful that we can add all of the tiers onto as part of the reconciliation list, because it is so important. And as I've been out in the community, one of the big concerns that folks have had besides the schools and the college is parks, and real serious concerns that our residents have with what these cuts will mean to their ability to take advantage of or to see improvements to the parks that they rely on. And I think it's such an important part of our quality of life. And the Parks Department has really been asked to do a tremendous amount, and I think without, in the proposed budget, adequate funding to do what we've asked. And I'm hopeful, and I know that the previous council was committed to, and so far in our committee work, this council has been committed to, and I look forward to all of us joining together to provide the Parks Department with the resources needed to provide the services that our residents rely on and appreciate so greatly. So thank you to the Parks Department, thank you to colleagues, and look forward to having a budget that reflects that reality.
Councilmember Glass.
Thank you, Madam President. I appreciate the work that the Fed Committee and GO Committee have been doing in this regard. I just want to briefly say, while we are talking about parks, share my affinity for the parks here on the council, but also back at home. My husband works for the Parks Department, so at this point in time, I just want to state for the record that pursuant to the county's ethics law, section 19A-11, I will be abstaining from any votes related to the parks. Operating budget. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair.
Okay, so thank you, Councilmember Glass, and your husband, I will have to say, is a really amazing employee, has given me some really good tips on orchids. And I am so excited that one particular orchid that I ventured to purchase from Brookside Gardens plant sale last year wouldn't bloom for a whole year, but now it's about to bloom. So I am so excited about that. So thank you.
That's
to Mr.
something you can put on your biography. Yeah.
I shall. I feel so accomplished. I must say that. All right, so I don't see any other lights. We do have here a committee, oh, I'm sorry.
No,
Are we done?
I was just going to see, in addition to, for the park fund, talking about the reconciliation list items, there are also a number of funds that are non-tax supported that the committee and council also approve, which are the property management fund, the enterprise fund, the advanced land acquisition revolving fund, a grant fund, and the special revenue fund. And there were no issues with those. There was no controversy, but they're very well laid out in the packet. So I don't know if you want to take the two separately, but you might also want to do this before we move into the administration fund.
Okay, Councilmember Reamer.
Yeah, let's do that when we get to the administration fund.
Okay, so I
this is
have a cover sheet. I'm trying to figure out how we did
where
the
we
vote
are.
here. Yeah.
Well, we've just covered the parks side, so
Okay.
we still need to proceed with the planning conversation about their tiers and then the enterprise fund, right?
Right. Well, actually, we will cover the administration fund. We will cover CAS
Okay,
funding.
the administration fund includes
Covers
the planning
CAS
fund,
funding. Right. Planning and CAS are under the administration fund. So we'll cover both of those pieces under the administration fund. And then these other funds, like I said, they are not tax supported, but they are approved.
Let's just come back to those after we do the planning.
Okay, sure. If you move forward in the staff report to,
Sorry, I want to clarify for my colleagues where we are.
Okay.
So we were just really on page 9 at the top. We kind of just worked our way through the tiers. And then coming up, there's a number of smaller funds. There's the enterprise fund and the ALAR fund, about which there wasn't really a ton of differences or discussions. So I think if there's no real questions about any of those items, we don't need to come back to them. We'll just breeze through them and keep going. All right.
correct. So that would move us to the very bottom of page 12, which is just the introduction to the planning department. And the planning department's work program currently it's organized into 4 programs. There's master plans, plan implementation and regulatory planning, information technology, and management and administration. At the bottom of page 13, you'll see how those work programs are broken down and how they were funded by the adopted FY19 budget and the requested FY20 budget. There's only one change in staffing for those. There's only the one position that is going to be transferring out of management and administration to the Parks Department, and that has to do with the Wheaton headquarters building staffing. We're on page 14, and this is where the committee had a conversation about the work program for the planning department before talking about the budget. Do you want to continue in that fashion?
Yeah, well, I want to, let's talk about the general plan now and just why we were concerned about the timing and just, I'd like maybe Gwen could talk about the plan and just what the elements are. And I think this is a big one. There's a lot of really deep conversations here about economic development and equity and sustainability, resilience. And these are things for the council to be involved in. And so it's a multi-year process, but it's one that often communities take on and they don't make it. It drags on for years and years because it can be controversial. We don't know how controversial ours will be, but I just want to highlight that again for everybody. We're taking this on. Let's hear about it a little bit and just start thinking about how you might want to participate in your own capacity in this process.
Thank you. For the record, Gwen Wright, Planning Director, and we are launching the general plan update as Councilmember Reamer described. We have had an incredible history in this county of a general plan that really is a landmark in planning practice, the Wedges and Corridors Plan for the 1960s. And it was looked at with sort of a refinement in 1993, but it has not been looked at since then. And you have to, again, think about all the changes that have happened in this county, in this world since the 60s. We've worked on a strategic framework for the plan, which is going to focus on economic health, equity, and environmental resilience and sustainability. And we, as Councilmember Reamer said, are on a tight time frame. We are hoping to have a draft to you in less than 2 years. So we're hoping to have a draft to you in the early spring of 2021. I have to get my years right. And to do that, we will want to work very closely with the council. One of the things that is coming up, in fact, you will be getting an email. We are going to be having our kickoff in late June for the general plan, and we want to work with each of your offices to help to sponsor events throughout the county. One of the things that is unique about Montgomery County is it is so big and has so many different kinds of communities. I've always said my goal is to make sure we have the best urban, the best suburban, and the best rural communities in the entire nation. But they are different neighborhoods, and we want to have a series of kickoff events. In fact, our theme for the general plan is, our sort of motto is Thrive Montgomery, because it takes on the idea that we are doing well. We are not going backwards as a county, but we're sort of just at a status quo. What we want to do is move beyond status quo to the point where we are thriving as a county in the areas of economic health, equity, and environmental resilience. So we're having what we're calling Thrive Week at the end of June, and we will be contacting each of your offices. We'd like to partner with you and with your constituents to have events throughout the county to talk about the launch of this general plan. But we have committed to a very, very challenging time frame, and hope to have a document that would be presented to you all, again, in less than 2 years. So we look forward to working with you on it, and I think, as again has been stated, if we all work together from the onset, we have a good opportunity to actually, achieve consensus with this document. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you. Go ahead, Ms. Dunn.
Thank you. Okay, so that's a good lead-in. At the top of page 15, you'll see a revised master plan schedule. This is just slightly revised from what was before the council at the semi-annual report, and it does what Ms. Wright has mentioned. It moves the general plan earlier, coming in the very early spring of 2021. It also moves the rustic roads master plan a little earlier, pushes the pedestrian master plan out a little further, and that sort of spreads out some of the things that the council will be reviewing at one time. In addition, the committee talked about adding possibly 2 new items to the work program for planning, and as the committee chair mentioned, one of those is an I-270 corridor transit plan, functional plan to look at transit in the I-270 corridor, and the other would be to look at the Silver Spring area. And the details of each of those plans is yet to be determined, but they are things that would be added to this chart.
Thank you. And as part of the general plan, we've discussed a special focus in there around economic development and universities, and what vision we might have about the future for expanding and strengthening our ties with universities, or even potentially building more university presence here in the county, and that's going to be a part of that.
Yes, in fact, one of the things that's in our budget is some consultant dollar funding, and we will be, assuming that funding is approved, we'll be scoping an economic study sort of along the lines of what Councilmember Reamer just described, that we can start right at the beginning of fiscal year 20.
So we can look forward to that conversation down the road. All right.
Great, which is a perfect segue. So there's a list of initiatives and professional services that on pages 15, 16, and on the very top of page 17 which are followed by a note along the chair's line that part of the general plan money would be to look at this economic analysis of the county and evaluate the potential to locate a four-year university. And then this is followed by the planning department's discussion of how would they try to come to that gap between their recommended budget and the county executive's recommended FY20 budget. And they too have found savings. At the very like around the middle of page 17, you'll see that they found savings in around $300,000, which is followed by then their tier 1 top priority for restoration, which does really go to the Wheaton headquarters operating budget impact. And then their second tier is modest. It has 4 items on it. One is for an intern program, placemaking initiatives, a study of ethnically diverse retail centers, and then some IT initiative funding, very modest. And those basically make up tier 1 and tier 2 for the planning department.
Okay, so once again, much of that funding is for the Wheaton move, which we didn't anticipate having to fund in this way, but there are some important additions. Our intern program, which is working hard to have a presence on college campuses and also particularly to help diversify the workforce pipeline of the department. We've got placemaking, which has been so crucial for different parts of the county. This very interesting idea about our strip centers and how we can preserve them, and some of the basics, the IT kinds of things that everyone just expects to work.
Okay. If we move along, then, and you'll turn to page 18.
One second, we have a
Oh, I'm sorry.
question. Councilmember Rice.
Thank you. I just wanted to understand the intern program is a part of the departmental priorities. If you could just tell me a little bit about that.
Sure. We have had for the last several years an internship program. We reach out to mainly local colleges and universities, but some from outside of the region, to bring in interns who work with the planning department in the summer. It's been a great source of potential future employees. We reach out to, we make a point of reaching out to universities like Morgan State that has a very good planning program, but sort of serves some underrepresented folks in the world of planning. And we have had a lot of success in getting some great interns. This is not saying that the internship program would be completely eliminated, but it would be reduced in size. We'd have fewer interns. We do an excellent, again, summer program with them. We partner with the parks interns, and we take them around the county to see different facilities to help them experience what planning can create. And the interns have all said it's been a very educational experience. And again, it helps us get new employees that help us diversify our workforce.
Let me just say that this is an incredibly important point, and one that I didn't want to gloss over, in the sense that, and I applaud Parks' efforts to really focus on not just the park side, but the planning side. We've seen in this general space that there has been an underrepresentation when it comes to people of color and really getting involved in these fields. And so this is incredibly important. And so I'd just like to highlight this for my colleagues. I'm not sure what the full amount is, because that's not listed here, Ms. Dunn, as to what the 100% would be, but especially when you have relationships with schools like Morgan State and others, where we know that it's going to help to not only really address what we will see amongst all of our employment sectors is an aging out, but the opportunity for us to really start to diversify those workforces that traditionally have not been that is something where we need to seize an opportunity like this. And so my suggestion would be that we see what else we can do to help restore that back to what it was before. I really wouldn't want to see us to go backwards when it comes to a program that is helping to address the diversity of our overall workforce, especially in a place where it's typically underrepresented. So, Mr. Chair, Madam President.
I think Mr. Chairman wants to
Sure.
clarify
Thank you.
something.
Thank you for bringing that conversation forward. So let's understand what's on the list there. 2A, does the $45,805 get you back to full funding of the program, or is it only a partial restoration?
No, that would be back to full funding of the
Okay,
program.
so that would be back to full funding. Okay, so we do need to get this, because without this,
Okay.
the program is not
Because
fully
it said,
funded.
because it said reduce intern
It's
program by 70%,
confusing.
which makes it seem as though
Yes,
it's
it's
a
only going to
reduction, so-
70%,
Right,
or
exactly.
what happened. I'm glad you asked, because I honestly wasn't totally sure myself. So this funding would get us to 100%, and anytime you want to send us a focused presentation about that for folks to scroll through, I bet you there'd be a lot of interest.
So thank you very, so that, it's just, and again, this has nothing to do with, of course, parks and planning, but it is kind of troubling to see a cut like this come from the county executive side. And is very concerning, and one that has the opportunity to affect diversity and support the equity initiative that we have, that our council president is leading, and goes quite contrary to that overall thought of what it is that we're trying to do. I mean, I saw this right away. This is the first time that I'm seeing this, and see it easily as a way for us to affect this sort of change that we're seeking. And so from that perspective, it's just kind of confounding to me why we would have something like this coming over from the other side. But nonetheless, we'll do the work that we need to keep the good work going. So thank you.
Thank you so much for bringing that
If
up
I could,
and
we
noting that.
would like to clarify
Yes,
that the
please
executive
clarify.
doesn't get to see the list of unidentified or recommended cuts, from Park and Planning prior to when they come to you. So there is a time lapse, and the executive provides a recommended funding level, and then Park and Planning works to identify what cuts are needed from their proposed budget to make it. And so the executive didn't see these items in his recommended budget.
I appreciate that clarification. I think that, as Councilmember Rice is noting, regardless of where the cuts are being identified, if we are going to be serious about this issue of racial equity and social justice, we have to pay so close attention to all these details. This is why the legislation is going to be so critical, because then we wouldn't have to, be reactive. We would be identifying beforehand all of those opportunities that lead to a more diverse workforce that reflects the community that we serve. And so thank you for pointing that out. I think that's very important. Councilmember Katz.
Thank you very much, Madam President. So just so I understand, it's obviously paid interns. Is that, and how many interns are we talking about here?
What we have typically had in past years is somewhere around 6 interns in the department, and they're assigned to different divisions and do different kinds of tasks. And so again, this would probably reduce it down to maybe 2 interns.
If we were to keep the 19,000, you're
Yes.
saying, so.
Yeah.
So obviously, I think all of us are supportive of it, and the question is, how much lead time do you need to get interns?
Well, this is for next summer. So
Okay.
we have already, in the
You have 'em for
current
this
year
year.
funding, have budgeted the interns for this summer. So this would be for the summer of 2020. Yeah.
And that was my concern, is because obviously this budget starts in the summer. So, so you can fund them in the prior year in order to get through.
We encumber the money, yes, in this year to get through the summer, and then we would need this money for the summer of 2020.
Thank you very much.
Councilmember Reamer.
Great. Just along these lines, item 2B, we're not actually, if we approve the reconciliation, we're not approving eliminating the increase. This is the funds to restore the increase. This is the language I think that Parks used itself as to what the consequence of cuts were. And so it's a little outdated, but, the way we would look at it is sort of restoring.
Correct.
Right.
That needs to be updated. Yeah, that should be updated. Okay, Ms. Dunn.
Thank you. At the top of page 18, then you'll see that the committee unanimously supported for the planning department retaining all of Tier 1 and Tier 2 priorities for restoration. And if the council supports this, the Tier 1 and 2 restoration total would then be $558,378 would be added to the reconciliation list.
Okay.
The other part of the administration fund is the Central Administrative Services funding. It functions for both Montgomery and Prince George's County. The amount that would need to be reduced for CAS, based on the executive's recommended budget, was around $350,000. CAS as well took a look at their budget to look for savings, and then on page 19, you'll see that they were able to find reductions of $104,666, meaning that there's still a gap of $245,535 between the two budgets, and the committee supported allowing those non-recommended reductions to take place for CAS. There is the bi-county meeting on the May 9th, so after May 9th, it's not possible to change their budget.
You again explain the wrinkle here. This one was very confusing,
let Marlene
and everyone
explain
should
it better than
understand.
me.
You take up the reconciliation list after you will vote on this budget with Prince George's County. So after Thursday, you cannot make changes. And so what the council has typically done is just taken the reductions to CAS. I will be sometime this week having a conversation with my counterpart at Prince George's County to go through the recommendations for WSSC and for park and planning. We try, where we disagree, we try and find some middle ground. So you may see some changes as a result of my conversations with him.
And then the last piece of this is just a review for the council and the committee was all the pieces that make up the special revenue fund. I do want to note that at the end of the document, I had suggested that the MNC PPC had asked for a $500,000 transfer from the administration fund to the Development Review Special Revenue Fund. The county executive did not support that transfer. I characterize that as a change from FY19. It's actually not. Last year as well, that transfer was not supported, and so what that basically means, and planning can chime in a little more, but it basically just means that if they find that they can't meet what they need, they'll go to the balance of the fund for the funding, or they'll come in for a supplemental.
Okay.
So I just wanted to clarify that. And that pretty much covers what's in the packet.
All right, thank you. Councilmember Jawando.
Thank you, Council President. I just wanted to chime in on the, again, as I did with parks in the planning context, we strongly supported on our committee, and I want to thank my colleagues restoring all these tiers, and we think it's important. I know we focused on 2A, the intern program, which I brought up in the Fed committee as well. You know, I started my political career as an intern, as a paid intern, and the only reason I was able to do it is because I was paid. And it's important to support those, but also 2C, preserving the community value of ethnically diverse retail centers is going to be a challenge going forward. We've lost some. I mentioned this in the committee as well, and as Purple Line and other things happen, this is an important thing that we need to focus on. It needs to be part of our general plan. So these, in my opinion, again, are not, while we have to make sure that you all can move and the lights come on and the internet's working and all that, and that's critical, I think these are very critical as well, and I encourage my colleagues to support the full list and thank the committee chairman and my colleague, Councilmember Friesen, for doing so as well.
Thank you, Councilmember Jawando. You actually reminded me this morning, I think on NPR, there was a study that was discussed. It was a national study regarding the challenges that malls, different type of strip malls, et cetera, are facing nationally. But actually, it was noting that immigrants and people of color were pretty much revitalizing such places because people tend to want to go to retail spaces that offer a unique experience. And so they spoke about certain jurisdictions where they had assisted through zoning to facilitate the reuse of some of these strip malls and some of these very big box stores to convert them to different types of retail spaces for ethnic groups, et cetera, and now they're thriving. So there is this very interesting, I think, transformation that's occurring, and it reminded me of our work, needed work in some of our areas of the county in terms of how do we repurpose some of these retail spaces to activate them. again, and some of the challenges that we have, like in Burtonsville, for example, and other areas. So interesting, try to look it up and see what else the study has demonstrated there. Okay, so what I want to do, because Councilmember Glass does have to recuse himself from some of the decision points, and so I'm not really sure how that interfaces with the cover page. I'll ask Ms. Michelson to kind of give me some direction in terms of how to call for
If
votes.
I can suggest one vote on all of the funds that either directly or indirectly relate to parks and a separate on the administration. So the first straw vote would be on the park fund, the property management fund, the enterprise fund, the ALAR fund, and the special revenue funds, all of which in some way relate to parks. And then a second one on the administration fund, which is the planning department and CAS.
Okay, and so on those that first cohort, there aren't any changes recommended from the committee? Are there any changes? Which one are those?
For the Parks Department, the recommended changes are the restoration of tiers 1, 2, and 3 to the.
Okay, and
The committee's-
what else would be, so that would be item number 2 on the cover memo, right?
Correct.
Okay, any other item?
And,
that we
and
can
item
take
number
as a
3
block?
as well, I'm sorry, because that
Number
adds tier 3.
Okay,
And that's it for this
and
part of it.
then number 4, is that also, well, that's already
Where's
been
the
taken
transfer
care
that
of.
the
That's taken
other
care
committee
of.
took care
We
of,
took care of
yes.
that. Okay, so item 2 and 3 on the
Correct.
cover letter, we will call for those first.
Funds where the committee did not recommend any changes, so.
Your mic isn't on.
Sorry, enterprise fund, property management, ALARF, and special revenues, there are no committee recommended changes there, so that should be part of that group.
Okay, so that's what we will take first. Everybody, all those in favor, raise your hand. Okay, and that would be Councilmember Jawando, Hucker, Reamer, Albornoz, Rice, Friedson, Katz, and myself, and Councilmember Glass, who abstains. Okay, and then the second,
Then the administration fund, you can do as one vote, which includes the planning department and central administrative services.
all right, all those in favor, please raise your hand. Okay, that's unanimous. All right, are we done then? Anything else?
We are done with the operating budget. You do have
Okay,
before you
let's go for the-
today a CIP item,
all right.
which is Part B. And this was, you had a public hearing on this, and this has been before the committee. This doesn't make use of tax-supported funding. This is really a transfer, but basically there are 3 things before you. The first 2 are amendments to the capital budget, really to support the development of West Bard Urban Recreational Park. And they amend the 2 capital projects, which is acquisition local parks and acquisition non-local parks. Then the third amendment this morning, which we'll take up last, is an amendment to that you received from the county executive involving the CUP revenue and ball field funding. But the first 2 is the acquisition local parks and the acquisition non-local parks. They are primarily funded through the program Open Space money, which is from the state of Maryland, a transfer tax dedicated to planning, acquisition, and the development of recreational land or open space. The Parks Department has sufficient program open space revenue to acquire 2 parcels in the West Bard Urban Recreational Park, but the appropriation for those revenues is split between the 2 acquisition capital projects, the local park fund and the non-local park fund. In consultation with the Office of Management and Budget, the Parks Department is asking to reduce their appropriation request for FY20, so it's not an amendment in that sense. It is an adjustment to their FY20 appropriation request related to the local parks. And if you'll turn to the second page of the report, you'll see at the top that the committee supported the amendment to the FY19 capital budget and FY19 through 24 CIP, which is to fund at $2.5 million from program open space funding for non-local parks and to recognize $353,000 in private contributions. And at the same time, the committee supported the Planning Board's request to amend their FY20 capital budget request for local parks, reducing the program open space funding by $2.5 million to facilitate the development of West Bard.
Okay. Councilmember Friedson.
Thank you for that. I'll be brief. We had an extensive conversation about this at the Fed committee, but this is really a terrific project, a really important project, one that I think creatively leverages less money upfront for the expense of this project that we wouldn't be able to do and aren't able to do immediately. And so it extends out the time horizon for that, which reduces the cost to taxpayers and is an acquisition that's desperately needed in an area of the county, down county, that is very difficult to acquire property due to costs and due to limited access, and also has a connectivity because it connects what we're already doing in terms of the dedication, which was a core part of the Westbard Master Plan process. And so I am really excited about this project, was happy to be helpful here, and really applaud the park staff and park and planning for what was a really creative solution to this, to be able to acquire property in an area that's difficult, frankly, to acquire property, and to leverage resources to make it happen.
Thank you. Councilmember Reamer.
Thank you. Yes, really wanted to highlight the same issues. This park that we're getting, we're getting it because we took on the Westbard Sector Plan. Now we're allocating funds now towards a vision that we established in that plan, and it has been probably one of the most difficult plans of the last, I don't know, 30 years or something like that. And people say, why are you doing this kind of thing? These plans are terrible. We're only moving forward on this park because of that plan. I also just want to express appreciation for my colleagues and the county executive's support of using some of the CUP fund for ball field renovation here. We've got $250,000 there. This comes from the fees that people pay to use the fields. And so we've been every year using some allocation of resources from CUP to continue to build this program to take in new fields, and once we've renovated them, support maintenance of it. And so we're continuing with that here.
All right, great. So are we
Right.
now?
Right, the last amendment before you is this transfer of money from the CUP fund to pay for ball field renovation. So all three are before the full council for basically your straw vote to go.
Yeah. All right, so we have a committee recommendation. All those in favor, please raise your hand. And that is unanimous. Thank you very much. So I believe with that, we're
That's it.
done with
Thank
this
you so
item.
much.
Thank you, everybody, for being here. We do have some interviews at 11:30, so I think I'd like to pause for 10 minutes or so we can restart at 11:30. Okay? We'll take a break. Resume our work this morning, and we're going to start with item number 3. This is an interview on the county executive's appointee as director for Public Information Office, Mr. Barry Hudson. Good morning. This is a extremely important position, as basically I think that communication has become more and more of a need, but also more and more of a challenge as the media landscape changes and as people consume information in all kinds of different ways. We here in Montgomery County are constantly examining how we can best communicate with our constituents and what are the different mechanisms that we can employ in order to do that, because our work is so very important and our constituents are extremely interested in participating and being very involved. So we're very excited about this particular appointment. And so let me start by turning over to Mr. Klein for some introductory remarks. And Mr. Hudson, I will have some prepared questions, then we'll open it up for a dialogue with my colleagues. Mr. Klein.
Good morning, Madam President, members of the council. I'm Andrew Klein, Chief Administrative Officer. I'm very pleased to introduce to you Barry Hudson for confirmation for Director of the Office of Public Information. I think Barry is exceptionally well qualified for this role. For several years, he ran County Executive Baker's communications operation in Prince George's County, so he knows the regional media, he knows the regional issues. He led a branding campaign for Prince George's County. I think it's very important for us in Montgomery County to look at branding as a way to build community, to I think to help boost our economy, and also to really help bring up the morale of our employees. I think it can do all those things if it's done right. Barry also has experience managing call centers, and as you know, our 311 call center is within the office of PIO. So looking forward to Barry getting in, taking a look at the operation, helping us address some of the issues that have been identified there. So look forward to this conversation, and thank you.
Thank you so much. Well, Mr. Hudson, I guess Mr. Klein has enumerated some of the different types of the experiences that you have and some of the things that you've done. Tell us, in your own words then, why did you decide to apply for this position?
First of all, thank you, Madam President, for having me here today and the rest of the council. I applied for this position and I was interested in it because of the importance of, well, I'll just go back to a statement he made. I really am into regionalism, and I've seen through my time in the county executive's office the importance of working with other parts of the state as well as the region in promoting a regional message. I was interested in this position in particular because I saw in a different way some of the things I could bring to the position. Mr. Klein indicated I had background in branding, and I think this is an important time in Montgomery County to use branding as a way to position the county as a few things. One, an economic force within the Washington metropolitan region and certainly in the state of Maryland. And two, a very diverse and robust county with a lot of things going on in it. From Up County to Silver Spring, there's a lot of exciting things going on in Montgomery County. And I think one of the jobs of this particular position is to ensure that not only the residents and businesses understand that, but also the region. So I was excited about that. I thought I did a pretty good job of that in Prince George's County, and I thought I could bring those skills here to Montgomery County.
Okay. I will have to concur that you seem to have done a very good job in Prince George's County, and it's been noticed, so that I can attest to. So our first question is that your resume shows you have experience in managing a call center when you worked at NEA. And as you're aware, Montgomery County does have ongoing issues with our customer service provided through our 311 system. What is your definition of a successful call center? And can you describe how you would begin to address some of the challenges that we currently face with the 311 system?
Thank you. One of the excuse me. One of the things I learned at my time at NEA Member Benefits, which, by the way, was located at 51 Monroe Street when I first started working there, and moved to Gaithersburg, Maryland, which is where the company is now. One of the things I learned there was that when members, in that case of the National Education Association, are paying dues, it is the obligation of the organization to ensure that they receive quality service. I think the same applies to government. Government owes its taxpayers and supporters the best quality service possible. And when it comes to defining an successful call center, the notion is that everyone in that call center, from management down to the representatives, have to be focused on providing quality center service. A successful call center has quality service as a way of life and guides the work and actions of the team. And throughout my career, I've done customer service assessments on call centers to determine what areas need to change or be adjusted to improve performance. And for the most part, those assessments have centered around three things: staffing, quality assurance and training, and systems and data. Staffing is really important because no call center can function effectively without proper levels of staffing. This requires management and the management team to analyze data and information to ensure that the service levels are met. A successful call center is managed so that representatives are available to answer calls, assist callers, so that the wait and hold times are within the service targets. A successful call center provides a work environment that appreciates the service representatives, and that's really, really important because it's hard work to talk to people who may at times be irate, impatient, but at the end of the day, you have to serve them, so that work has to be recognized. To follow up on that notion of providing service, it's very important for the training and quality assurance to be in place. And that means that it's an important part of the service and the center to ensure that the representatives are providing quality service to each and every caller. That would mean that an effective call center would have a call monitoring program that includes coaching as well as recognition of the good work that staff does. And then last and certainly not least, the service representative and the call center are only as good as the systems that support them. Without the right tools, a call center may be hampered in providing the quality experience for its callers. In today's world, an effective customer relations system, or CRM, should provide representatives and the call center management with the tools they need to be successful. So they have quick access to information and enables each of the representatives to move quickly through the call, thus resulting in less hold times and abandonments. In addition, data collected during calls enables the county to gather valuable information to be used for budgeting, service delivery, and etc. So overall, a successful call center is an operation with the following: an overarching philosophy that is, we owe callers a good experience. In other words, we work for them. A focused and well-trained staff, an environment that reinforces the call center's commitment to quality service through a recognition program and monitoring, and data systems that support the work of the call center and its mission. I'm a firm believer that the government is in what I call the quality of life business. What that means is that the government has a responsibility to provide residents and businesses with quality service. The call center is an extension of the government's commitment to quality, and it must deliver a level of service that residents and businesses deserve and expect.
Thank you. So as you are aware, Montgomery County really is a microcosm of the world. It is a county that is obviously majority of color. Over a third of our residents are foreign-born. There are more than 160 languages spoken. And there is a lot of work to do to ensure that all of those folks in those communities have access to their local government. What is your philosophy when it comes to not only public information, but the outreach and the engagement and the education-based vis-a-vis civic education regarding that? What is your philosophy so that we can truly reach and engage our constituents?
Well, you know, you bring up a really good point, and one of the diversity of the county is, you know, one of the things that a lot of people outside of it aren't totally aware of. And I think that accenting that diversity is very important. But I also think that one of the things that is really, really key, and it is a challenge that I think the government has, is to make sure that it is making the government open and welcome to all residents. When there are language barriers, cultural barriers, and the like, some of the systems and things that have traditionally been set up make it a little more difficult to them. So for instance, those who are Spanish speaking, it is really important not just to have Spanish speaking representatives in the office, but also to try as much as possible ensure that all documents and information are easily translated or provided in translated format so that folks can interpret it. I think it's also important to make sure that there is a recognition of the difference in cultures and language barriers that may exist. So I think it's really important for our office to take all those things in consideration, and to look at ways and channels through which we can communicate to those diverse audiences on their terms and through their channels. Because what's very difficult sometimes is that you pound on the normal channels that you use and you're not reaching the majority of people. But by having not just a diverse staff but a diverse outlook, it's easier to find those channels. I think working with this council in your given districts or throughout the county at large, I think our office can put some things together that would make sure that we do touch those various audiences that may have been thus far overlooked or underserved.
Thank you. How would you approach working with council members and our staff? What type of direction will you give your communications staff regarding information sharing and our collaboration on joint initiatives? One interesting experience that previous councils have had are things like executive scheduling announcements and our press conferences on Tuesdays and things of that nature. And so we really want to turn a page. And I know that, County Executive Elridge, who was sitting over here, is very familiar with that. So just in general, what would be your approach to work?
Well, first of all, I know that from my previous experience, we try to stay away from Tuesday. And we do that because it's really important for, I believe, the county to show a united front as much as possible. And our goal here when it comes to whether it's events or announcements or things of that nature is to make sure that there is council inclusion. We'll certainly do the best to our ability to notify, and when those situations that we have the ability to plan around your schedules, whether it be in your district or whether it be something that includes the council as a whole. It's been my experience to work very closely with the council PIO. I did that in Prince George's County, and I would bring that same approach here. I think that the constituents in various parts of the county know council members and want to see their council member if there is a project happening in their area, if there's an event happening in their area, and we want you there too. So my answer to that, the short answer is we'll work very closely with you to ensure that there is inclusion as well as coordination when we do events and announcements through the county executive's office.
Thank you. So as you know, there is a sense among some in our community that Montgomery County is not business friendly. What type of strategic branding and communications efforts do you envision to dispel this misconception?
Well, what's interesting is that if it were 8 years ago, when I started in Prince George's County, everyone kept saying, we've got to beat Montgomery County. We've got to beat Montgomery County. So whether that was true, whether it's true on the outside is a different question. But I will say that there is a great deal that can be done, from my opinion. And I think that at the top of that, and Mr. Klein introduced the notion early, is that I think a look at branding would be a good idea. And before I kind of dive into that a little bit, branding can be a lot of things to a lot of people. Sometimes it's a logo, sometimes it's a slogan. But from my perspective and my experience, a brand is who you are, and a brand is your essence. And it takes a little bit of time to find that out sometimes. It's really easy sometimes to say, we'll just throw a little slogan at it and that's who we'll become. But what's even harder is to figure out who you are and what you want to project and how aspirationally you want to get to that point. Taking on a brand is an important commitment, and it certainly is a heavy effort. In Prince George's County, that effort took several years, from a lot of research to launching, and probably the biggest challenge with it was funding it. putting the money behind doing it and really kind of saying, and what are we going to get from this? So I think there has to be some thought around that. There is a responsibility to the residents and taxpayers to make sure that we're, good stewards of that money and do it right. But I think there has to be a look at that, because I think that overarching brand and who Montgomery County is in 2019/20 going forward is what that look would be. Until that work is done, if that work does engage, there are a number of things that can be done in the short run. One of them is to begin to focus on some of the attractions and destinations that are already here. One of the things that I know I had in conversations with some of the council members that I spoke with is there are great destinations in Montgomery County that folks just don't talk about enough in the region. Whether it's the Fillmore, whether it's Strathmore, whether it's AFI, and there's a whole list of them up county and around that we don't talk about enough. Just trying to get that information out, and by working with the CVB and the EDC, which is the approach we took in Prince George's County, just begin to coordinate and getting what we call the good news out. Because what is going to happen every day, and you guys know it better than I, the bad news is always going to be out there. That's easy. We can dodge and we can play dodgeball, and we can talk about the tough stuff and reframe it, and you do it in your districts, you do it and the like. But the hardest thing to do is to get somebody to pay attention to what's good that's going on. How many times at an event do you say, I really wish the media were here to see this? Well, in today's world, we have the ability, because of technology and the like, to really be that media. We have it in our hands most of the time. Sometimes we look at it too much. But that device allows us to take video, pictures, and use social media to begin to tell the story. And we know that there is a lot of viewing of that information. And I think this office will work very closely with the council on how we can coordinate that and tell the stories of those things. And that kind of leads me into the last piece, which is the stories, the good stories that are in each and every corner of this county, in everyone's district, whether it's a neighborhood, whether it's an individual within a neighborhood, whether it's a student, a community worker. There are thousands and thousands of great human interest stories in the county that just need to be unleashed and focused on. And I think one of the things that we will try to do is build that kind of goodwill, because every day reporters are going into their morning meetings trying to defend what they're going to go out there and cover. And they can cover last night's hearing on 270, but some of them are looking for something else. And it's our job to kind of work with them and funnel them those good stories. And they report them because a lot of times they get good activity when they repost them on their Twitter pages and the like. So the good stories and the good news are something else we're going to focus on. So I would, kind of wrap a bow around it. I would say it would be really great if we could do a branding effort, which will take time. But in the interim of that, we'll build a strategic plan to focus on, I'll say, telling the story of Montgomery County in the news media and social media.
Great, thank you. Are there any potential conflicts of interest of which we should be aware?
Not that I'm aware of, Madam President.
Okay, great. So I'm going to open it up to my colleagues. Councilmember Rice.
Well, thank you very much, Madam President. And I appreciate your question dealing with making sure that the county executive and the county council are together. I'm a big fan of the movie Drumline, One Band, One Sound. And it really is one in which we are one county, and a lot of our residents do not understand the separation between the two. And over the years, we've struggled at times, and I understand one being who doesn't always agree with his current county executive, who didn't always agree with the prior county executive, that there will be times where the county council and the county executive are on different pages. but the majority of times we are not. The majority of times we are on the same page and singing the exact same tune, but it seems as though our messaging is still separated. And so if you are appointed to this position, I really would encourage you to work in partnership with our outreach here on the council side to make sure that we are communicating as one county. I think that when it comes to branding, that's going to be incredibly important. If Marriott Division were to have Residence Inn saying one thing and the Ritz-Carlton saying another, it would be very difficult for that brand to succeed.
Right.
They all go under the branding of Marriott Bonvoy, and everyone's going to have a great time at whatever property you go to. We need to make sure that that same kind of messaging and branding, if you're taking that on, is something that encompasses us all. And so that will require some work that's being done beyond just coming up with that sort of phrasing or that sort of branding look. It's going to require, as you said, that work to get us to where we all are in agreement as to what it is that we're trying to project. Because there are a total of 10 of us who are elected who represent this county. And so from that perspective, we'll just all need to make sure we're all saying the same thing. But I look forward to working with you in this position. I've worked with you with County Executive Baker and think that you did a tremendous job in representing him in the county. I've heard great things from the county council members who I'm personal friends with, and the relationship you were able to foster between the county council and the county executive, and hope that you bring that same sort of spirit here to Montgomery County. So thank you. Thank you, Madam President.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Councilmember Jawanda.
Thank you, Madam President. Mr. Hudson, good to see you.
Good to see you.
And appreciate, Mr. Klein, you coming over here. I just want to say, I don't know if this is past practice. I appreciate you come over here every time. And maybe it's always how it's done, but I personally appreciate it because it hasn't always, for me, I'm glad that you make the time to do it.
I like being here.
Okay, good. We heard that. He likes being here. The slogan, so just on the branding, I like that you mentioned regionalism. I think, it's not a zero-sum game. It hasn't been for a long time. Obviously, there are benefits if a business, for example, locates in Montgomery County, that there's revenue and jobs that come from that we can expand our tax base, and we want to do that. Mm-hmm. But I agree with you that the greater Washington region has more to gain, and you saw that with Amazon people going in together and selling the region, and I think, we didn't get that certain prize, but I think overall that was a good exercise for everybody. And so I'm glad that you have that approach. I think that's critical, particularly on the messaging side, and how we promote ourselves. I did want to ask specifically about the branding, and I've thought about this for a long time. I used to go by the sign. I've lived up and down New Hampshire Avenue pretty much all the way, going down to D.C. when in college, and then Long Branch, and now further up New Hampshire. So I always used to go past the sign when you cross into D.C., that interesting point where Prince George's County's on one side, Montgomery's on the other, and you just cross D.C. And there was one of the signs for Prince George's County for years where it said, "A livable community."
Yeah.
And I just always thought that is horrible. That just sounds like, why not say bearable?
Yeah.
It just never, and I'm hoping I'm teeing this up right, because I'm thinking it's your administration that changed that tagline, and presumably at the time, though, someone did some research and said that saying it's livable was okay. And obviously, part of my point is that what people think is good vernacular changes over time, and what you highlight. And if you're a young person, what are you looking for in a community? If you're and that changes, and that needs to be kept up with. So I say that to say, could you talk a little bit about the process to go from something like that, and then even the decision to say, hey, we want to keep a tagline and we want to keep that going? And how did you go through that, and what did it cost? And you mentioned cost, if you could ballpark that, because I do think we need to decide and figure out what we're going to be in that regard, and your experience could be very helpful there.
So you are correct. We quickly tried to take down the livable community, because it did, in fact, it could be read either way, and it was too confusing, we thought. To your question about the process, and I've done this also before at my time at NEA Member Benefits. We went through a rebranding, so it was interesting that I went from that to the county. The process really is that, and I'll kind of cover cost as well with the whole piece. We actually used an outside agency, advertising agency, to assist us through the process. And that roughly cost about, at that time, about $250,000 to engage that agency. It was a county-based agency that did it. And what the process typically is when you do this is you spend a lot of time internally focusing on who you are, what your aspirations are, what you think the world sees you as, and you go through a series of internal questions and discussions. Then you would go through a process on the outside, which would include either surveys, either by telephone or other means in today's world, and then you'd kind of narrow down where you're going to go in some focus groups. So you'd focus group that information. So you do both quantitative and qualitative research. From that, the agency will then do its magic, which will be looking at all the information it has and coming up with look and feel, tagline, what images you should be using, what you should be focusing on, and the like. And then you take that back into focus group. Because that's when you would, to your point, find out that livable community is not the right word, aren't the right words. And you play those words back, and then you put it back out there, and then you make a decision on which tagline and look and feel and imaging you have, and then you begin the process of taking that brand and defining it within your organization as much as possible first. Because the toughest part about branding is the internal. It's easy on the outside. Because on the outside, it's a matter of, well, it's easy to do it, but it costs. But the internal is hard because once you decide who you are, and that's the decision that's really tough for on the government side, is people have to then begin to live it, who work for you. Now, one of the things that we did in Prince George's County was, because we knew it takes a lot to do that on the governmental side, we tried to make the brand more outside of the operations of the government. What do I mean by that? So the owners of the brand and the brand ambassadors largely were the Convention and Visitors Bureau, more lifestyle, the EDC, selling business, and then we actually leaned a little bit, but not as much, on getting assets from Park and Planning. So Park and Planning provided us the "It's Great to Live in Prince George's County" piece. CVB owned "They're Great Places to Go, Live, Play in the County," and EDC owned "Come Here and Do Business." We kept it away from the operations of the government as much as possible because it would be really a heavy lift to do that, particularly when the administration doesn't necessarily last for years. So in a corporation, that may be different, but on the government side, we thought it worked better that way. And so one of the reasons why I think we were partially successful is because we were already using departments and agencies who had to have an outward message. You know, EDC has to have an outward message. CVB has to have an outward message. And both those entities actually got stronger at their promotion and outreach as a result of the branding kind of umbrella that they were able to work under, because it gave them a marketing framework to work under. So after that, the tough part was finding the dollars to actually have an impactful work, because it's, you know, there are a lot of channels to go through. Certainly buying advertising on television. We did airports. We did roadside Highway 95 stuff. We bought stuff in magazines. So there was a significant cost to that. And even with the limited dollars we used, which was, you know, roughly about $500,000 annually, is how we kind of sustained it. But, you know, kind of making that commitment to do that, really developing a system to measure success. And in marketing, for those who know a little bit about it, you know, marketing is really a testing game. You don't know what's always going to work. So you're testing messages, you're testing effectiveness, and then you switch gears and try to do something else. So the answer to your question is it requires a great deal of research and information to drive your thinking, so that when you come out with your piece and who you are, you stand with it long enough, but you know you have behind you research that's kind of created the imagery and the look and feel that you want.
And commitment.
And commitment,
to
yes.
everyone, fidelity to everyone, to Councilmember
Yes,
Rice's
yeah.
point. So I appreciate that. And so the Fed committee just took up the Visit Montgomery and the EDC's budget, and both of them have spent a lot of money, time, and research on how to highlight various aspects of the county. And I think it's at a unique moment in time where you can come in and leverage some of those dollars that the county has already invested in marketing. For example, on the business side, the EDC spent a ton of money on marketing and highlighted a lot of our businesses. Visit Montgomery's done some great work. And so I think it's a key moment in time to come in and do this and consider us partners. I think I'm glad we're going to bring someone in with your level of expertise and focus on measuring the outcomes of what are the metrics we need to do if we're going to spend this money, which I think we need to do, but do it in a way that's coherent and reflects our commitment and fidelity in the spending taxpayer money the right way. So thank you and congrats. I look forward to supporting you. And
Thank you
working
for
with
your question.
Councilmember Albornoz.
Thank you, Madam President. Hey, Mr. Hudson, welcome aboard.
Thank you.
Very excited to see that you're here. County Executive Baker's a friend of mine, as I know he is a number of people on this dais, and I'm excited to see we've been able to tap into so many different talented people from his administration. So as a former department head, I can tell you that you're going to find that the level of sophistication within communications and public information within the individual departments varies greatly. And one of the challenges that I think were missed opportunities is connecting more effectively and directly the work of those agencies with the Public Information Office. And we went through a process of about years of decentralizing a number of those central administrative platforms into departments because we had to survive some really challenging times. But in this area in particular, I think we need to be more strategic in bringing things back so that we can capture those stories that I so appreciated you mentioning, but that they be rolled up into a more comprehensive and easy to articulate broader strategy that talks about economic development, that talks about ensuring that within our nighttime economy, we highlight those incredible arts-based institutions that we have in our county. And so our public information, you're inheriting a great team of very talented individuals, but our public information office, as it's been constructed, was built for a different time. And so we have to be much more strategic in how we're using social media platforms, but also in how we're aligning with those sister county agencies through MCPS, through Park and Planning, through the Economic Development Corporation, so that we can have a more common voice, and with the council as well. So that's going to be a tough task, going out and meeting with your counterparts from all of the respective agencies. But I would advise or encourage you within the first 6 months or so is to conduct a comprehensive analysis of where each of the departments are, because they've got great talented people, but they need help. And so having that level of support, I think, will be important. The other thing, too, is you guys have a unique perch because you're able to see this entire landscape of the county. And as is so often the case in a large bureaucracy like Montgomery County, the work is often siloed. And so I think beyond just spreading the message, the Public Information Office can and should play an important role in the strategic development of how we roll out our programs and services also. And so you can be a tremendous asset to the county executive and in many ways be his eyes and ears and your staff observe on the front lines what's happening every day. So that's another area that I think will be important for you to work on. I guess my final question, or not, those were all comments. My question is just to highlight and expand on something that Council President Navarro said in her opening comments. You know, because more than a third of our population is foreign-born, and everybody receives their media in different ways, and we have a bless you. If you could talk a little bit about the strategies that you intend to deploy so that we can better work with our immigrant communities and our newly arriving communities in the messaging of the county as a whole, so that they feel like they're part of the entire fabric of the county.
Thank you. And just to kind of back up on a couple of comments that you made, I think that in my previous experience, one of the things that we tried to do, because nothing was centralized in Prince George's County, all of our PIOs, the graphic people, the photographers, a lot of people were deployed to agencies. So one of the things that we did was we pulled, the folks who did the websites, everyone in together in regular meetings, and used those as a way to coordinate activities, whether they be special events or whether they be the design and development of collateral materials that would be distributed through whatever means to the constituency. So one of the things that we'll do is look at all those pieces and try to bring all those people who touch communications and kind of come up with some common ways for them to report up the information that they're engaged in. Because to your point, within agencies, there are announcements that are going to come up that are good for that county, that may have the council and the county executive there to announce this thing that in the agency they've worked up a really good plan, but they need the lift of the county executive's office and the council to actually make it newsworthy. So in that respect, we would work with them. To your second question, from a strategic perspective, obviously, the big word for me is assessment, is to begin to look at how information is flowing to those communities that you described today, what channels are being used to do that, as well as what information is it that we are providing today, and frankly, what we should be providing to them so that they can, have the quality of life that they should and want. In doing those assessments, I think, again, it's important for us to work with the council on some of those, because you all are closer to the ground on a lot of the issues in your particular areas of the county. In addition to that, through the county executive's office and others, finding out who those community leaders who are really close to those issues and helping us come up with those channels. Because as I said at the beginning, there's always a drumbeat of how people are communicating in every community. You just got to make sure that you're a part of that drumbeat and figure out a way to get in there. So strategically, I think it would be kind of first doing assessment, second looking at community partners that are already connected, working with the council, because in a lot of situations, people are, kind of in the same place physically. So in that respect, it's a lot easier to work through you all to understand where those communities are and have those kind of leads, and so the county executive's office will work with you in that respect, and then setting up, the best way to do that. A lot of folks are carrying phones. We know that that's like the tool for everyone. It's their computer, it's their phone, it's their notebook, it's everything. So how we get into that and make that an important part of how they use it, I think that's what we'll focus on. What do they use, how do they use it, and how do we get information in their hands that way?
Councilmember Reamer.
Welcome to the council family, and we'll look forward to working with you in the coming years, and good to see you, Andrew. Just wanted to observe that, as was mentioned earlier, the Amazon pitch, the Economic Development Corporation did lead a very extensive branding process for that pitch, and I thought they really nailed it, actually. They talked about how Montgomery County is a community that people move to from all over the world, substantially for public sector or public purpose-minded causes and careers, and whether it's you're employed in the health sector because you're trying to save lives and transform the health economy, or you're in the nonprofit sector, or you work for a federal agency. It's a purpose-driven community because of the people who live here. I just really loved that formulation, and what I loved about it also was it wasn't what I think a lot of times we instinctively want to do when we talk about branding, which is where can we drop the word innovation, and we shouldn't go in that direction. We should be different and distinct and really authentic and true. So I just wanted to encourage you to get the benefit of that development from the Economic Development Corporation. I think there was a lot there, and from my perspective, I might just use a version of that, but perhaps there's some alternatives that you'll find that are just as compelling. We'll see. But in any event, I think council members are going to want to be very involved in that. This is a county process, and I'm not quite sure where. I have thought of over the years of introducing legislation that would call for a branding exercise. I didn't, but I'm glad you're taking it on. And at the same time, I certainly want to have a voice in that process as well. So we'll just see how that proceeds.
And if you don't mind, council member, when that effort was taken on in Prince George's County, we had really a primary team of 5 people. It was myself, another person from my office, the council PIO, the person who handled communications for the CVB, and the person who handled communications for the EDC.
Nice.
And I think our 5th person was, did I name 4 or 5? That was 5? Okay. So we made sure it was diverse and covered.
That's a good
all
team.
Those different areas. Yeah. So to your point, if there was work already being done, we could factor it in.
Right. Cool. Good luck.
Thank you.
Councilmember Hooker.
Thank you, Madam President. Mr. Hudson, thanks for being here. Just got an unsolicited text from a journalist saying you're a good guy. So I was on the fence, but now I'm in your corner.
Did it have his name at the end?
Yeah, right. Yeah. Hey, wait a minute. Yeah, well done. So Councilmember Rice got into this and for me, but I'll try to elaborate a little bit. I think it's critical that your office and our PIO office are highly coordinated and cooperative. And as you know, communication and marketing are challenging arts. And there's an awful lot of individuals out there where no matter how powerful your operation is, there's always more individuals we're trying to reach we won't be able to reach with on any given day, any given issue, any given press release. It's so important that we be pulling in the same direction and adding and multiplying our forces to get to more people and not undercutting each other. And just in the one term I've been here, it often felt like with your predecessor that there were many opportunities that were seized to sort of score cheap tactical political points by putting the council in a bad light. And in many cases, your side has a more probably well-funded communications operation, and I don't think that reflects very well to any of us, to our public. It might have been on spending decisions where you criticize the council, knowing that the county exec was going to then propose a supplemental budget 2 weeks later, but we were cast as the spendthrifts, or on just basic policy decisions that are, or disagreements that are sort of lost on the public, whether it was stormwater or 5G cells or other things where, honest, smart people can disagree on the outcome. And I think the public really doesn't want to see their well-paid elected officials disputing policies in public and trying to cast different sides of the street in a bad light. So I really hope we can very much avoid that, because I don't think it reflects well on us. When I first ran, it was in a district where the former senator and the former delegate were well known as rivals, and they constantly sniped at each other every opportunity they got. And the lesson I got door knocking there was nobody likes that. Nobody understands which side they should be on. Mm-hmm. They just don't want to see it. I hope you agree.
Yes. Here's how I would address your question in saying this. Each of you represent a constituency and a portion of a constituency that will have an issue or concern at times that might be counter to that of the county executive. It's just going to happen. But most days of the week, everyone is working to move Montgomery County forward. And if there is a big announcement, as the council member said, like Amazon, if there is a development in a certain community, if there's an affordable housing announcement, if there's a major funding piece that you all had to sign off on legislation that we might have proposed, any of those things, everyone owns. And the more that, to your point, I think the constituency sees, particularly in the environment we live in nationally, the council and the county executive working together to move the county forward, I think it's always a good thing. Certainly there will be times when we won't be on the same page, perhaps, but I think most of the time the effort, at least of my office, will be to try to make sure that a council member is present if we're in their district, that if it's an issue related to a committee or a cause that the council members are heavily engaged in, and the constituency certainly knows that, we want to make sure that you're there. We'll certainly make sure that the council president is there to say a few words or the like. Because at the end of the day, to your point, residents, and frankly, largely even business people, don't draw that executive legislative line. They just don't do it. They expect everyone to get up every day, come to work, and work for the betterment of their lives. That's what they're thinking. Right. And when there's a fight between that they kind of get snippets of from the 4 o'clock news or at 11 o'clock if it makes it that far, they draw a conclusion. But many of them aren't reading Bethesda magazine. They're not reading, the Sentinel. They're not watching, a close news report. So they just get enough to know that there's a fight. And they don't understand why. So our job, I think, is to collectively show that, yes, there will be times when there is disagreement, and that's okay. But most of the time, it's about moving the county forward. And having council and the executive stand together is the best way to display that to the constituency.
Right. Thank you. And then just second, it was mentioned the importance of rebranding or brand refreshing or tweaking for the business community and to maximize our economic development potential. I absolutely agree with that. I think we have multiple audiences, and we certainly need to continue to show Montgomery County as a high-functioning, desirable place to live for people who live here now, but don't always hear all the good news that we could be telling them all the time of the reasons that we stand out nationally among 3,000 other counties in the country. And also to people thinking of moving here or who live in DC or Fairfax or Prince George's or wherever. And then third, I think you want to be attentive to, I'm sure you'll agree, our perception in Annapolis with our state legislators and the need to tweak our brand with them and with not just our legislators, but especially legislators from outside Montgomery County. So they understand the challenges we're facing, the diversity you mentioned, our economic challenges we're under, and the fact that the streets aren't paved with gold here, but that we do disproportionately contribute to all the state's assets in Maryland. And then third, well, I'm just glad you applied. I'm a big fan of your work from a distance and of the former county executive, and I'm glad we're going to be on the same team.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, Mr. Hudson, so there is no doubt that the work that you did in Prince George's County has been noticeable, and I think that we are in that same kind of place right now in the county where we're all, as you heard from my colleagues, very committed to leverage our assets, to leverage our story, to leverage what we have in order to take everything to the next level, and you no doubt have done that very well. And I would be remiss as the mom of 2 daughters, one of which is about to graduate this weekend, the second one from Howard University. On their behalf, I'll have to say HU to you.
You know.
Because if not, they would not forgive me if I didn't do that and say that there is no doubt that, Howard University as the Mecca has done extraordinary work with my 2 daughters, and I see, as always, has done extraordinary work with sending a lot of people to different leadership positions throughout the region, and you're no exception. So we look forward to to the vote tomorrow, and we really thank you for deciding to come over here to the county and help us tell our story in a much more efficient and effective fashion.
Thank you, Madam President. A point of personal privilege, my son's graduating from Howard on this week as well.
Wonderful.
So, yeah.
Friday and Saturday. Maybe we'll see each other over
that's
there.
Right, that's right.
My daughter graduates from the School of Business, so she's got those 2 ceremonies there, and we can't wait.
And
Very
mine
excited.
is a journalism major.
Congratulations.
So, yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
All right. So with that, we are adjourned until 1:30. We will have 2 other interviews this afternoon as well. Thank you. Number 4. Yeah, we are on item number 4. We are going to interview Mr. Bernard Wright, and this is for the position of Director of the Department of Technology Services. So with that, Mr. Klein.
Thank you, Madam President, members of the council. Pleased to bring before you today Bernard Wright for Director of Technology Services. Bernard has been an IT leader in the public, nonprofit, and private sectors for more than 2 decades. He's currently the CIO for WSSC and had that same role for Prince George's County for several years. He's built a reputation for leadership, integrity, technical expertise, and willingness to challenge the status quo. Look forward to having him as a partner in making Montgomery County the most accessible, efficient, and data-driven county in America. And with that, I'll turn it back to you, Madam President.
Thank you so much. Okay, Mr. Wright, we do have a number of just standard questions, and then we'll open it up for conversation with our colleagues. So first one is, tell us what specific parts of your background and qualifications make you the best person to lead the Department of Technology Services as the county's Chief Information Officer.
All right, good afternoon, Madam President, council members. Thank you for the opportunity. For the record, my name is Bernard Wright. So in terms of what makes me the best fit for this position, I have been, as was stated, I was the CIO for Prince George's County for 6 years, and that was before I joined WSSC as CIO. But in addition to that, as a part of my professional experience as well, I helped to stand up the 311 call center for Montgomery County. That was, at this point, I think it was almost a decade ago that happened. In addition to that, I also participated in a 911 study to lower call processing times. So I had the opportunity to see Montgomery County up close and see what some of the opportunities were for improvement, things that Montgomery County does well. But I really got a good feel for the culture here, and for those reasons, I do think that I'm a good fit for this position.
What do you see as the most important issues facing the department, and what is one innovative idea or initiative that you might bring to the county?
So one of the biggest challenges that I see here in Prince George's County, and wouldn't even really frame it as a challenge, it really is an opportunity, it's the fact that Montgomery County is very decentralized with its IT resources. There are departments that have a very large IT presence. In addition to that, there are lots of different initiatives that you're looking to take on. And what that means is that you have to be very creative in how you bring those different parties together. So in terms of an opportunity, I really see the fact that we could have liaisons with each one of those departments who are responsible for communicating that department's needs back to the central IT department, but also making sure that we're communicating things that we're planning on doing as well. So it's nothing that really is groundbreaking, but I think that there really are lots of opportunities around communication and making sure that there are clear expectations in terms of governance, enterprise architecture, and making sure that the county is more secure. So what I would propose is not wide sweeping changes in terms of technology, but more incremental change. And that goes back to what I said around restrictions and constraints with your budgets. So we can make sure that we are transparent with what we're planning. We can make sure that everyone is tracking and aware of what's going on at any point in time. And I think that that's worked well for me in other places, but I think that there is an opportunity for that to work well here in Montgomery County as well. Dashboards so that you can see the progress of projects, service level agreements so that you know exactly what to expect in terms of interactions with the department, but also making sure that there are regular meetings between the IT department and all of the other departments that make up Montgomery County.
Please explain your understanding of your role as it relates to the council.
Sure. So the CIO is responsible for the entire government. And that means that, of course, I report up to the county executive, but I'm also responsible for making sure the other branches of government are equally as successful. So with that being said, what I would do is go back to the previous question that you asked and my answer to that question. I'd make sure that there was a liaison that I was working with on a regular basis who is operating on your behalf, making sure that I'm communicating regularly, make sure that whenever your needs are identified, that I'm giving you regular updates on those needs and what I'm doing to make sure that we're making progress. So I do see myself as being accountable to all branches of government, and that's council included. So I would treat you with the same level of respect that I treat the county executive with.
Thank you, and that's important because we have the final say on the budget, so
Absolutely.
that always helps.
That I know.
Also, can you talk a little bit about, we do have an Interagency Technology Policy Coordinating Committee, ITPCC. Can you talk a little bit about the work of that committee, and do you have any ideas or have you given any thought of how we could enhance the work of that particular committee?
Sure. So I am aware of the ITPCC, and what I think needs to happen there is it really needs to start at a level higher than the CIOs. To be honest, just based on the way that we tend to operate as CIOs, we want to believe that we're the smartest person in the room, which means that we all make our own decision, whether or not it's what everyone else agrees with. But I think that at the very beginning, we need to agree that, IT decisions need to be streamlined across the board, that, we really do need to work together where there are opportunities for, for us to use the same resources. For example, data centers, server rooms, making sure that there are, that infrastructure decisions are common across the board, like desktops, making sure that laptops are standardized, and also make sure that you scale your purchasing power. So if we collectively agree that, for example, we're going to go to Office 365, instead of us just having one agreement, make sure that everyone across the board agrees on what those things are and that we leverage our collective buying power. So in terms of ITPCC, I think that there really are opportunities, like I said, to start at a higher level to make sure that the senior stakeholders of each one of those bodies are in agreement, but then from there to make sure that we are having more regular meetings and that everyone agrees on what it is that we're going to be doing across the board, and that we're also tracking our progress against those commitments.
When you say the senior stakeholders, who are you referring to?
So, for example, I think that, like I said, I know that there are multiple IT shops in the government, but for example, the chief administrative officer could say, could actually force that we all work together. That's really where it has to start. I think that senior leadership for each arm has to say that this is what we're going to do, because if it's left up to IT people, we probably are never going to get on the same page.
Absolutely, I appreciate that. And it does have a structure where the principals do, have to meet and they have to come together for the work plan, and then the CIOs basically are the ones who enforce and operationalize everything. So
Absolutely.
I hope that we can continue to strengthen that structure. So what are your thoughts on ensuring that our systems are as secure as possible? And what new ideas do you have to implement more robust cybersecurity policies?
So cybersecurity is, I believe, the biggest challenge in IT. And that really starts with end users, just making sure that everyone understands what they should and should not do, not clicking on links in email, not downloading files. But what I would do is something very basic and make sure that everyone was aware of what those challenges were. Make sure that everyone understands what their role in cybersecurity is. So put a strong focus on end user security awareness. So regular modules, make sure that people participate in those modules for training. And if they don't participate, then there have to be penalties for not doing what is expected. In addition to that, you have to take it a step further. Make sure that you're regularly scanning for vulnerabilities. Make sure that you're mitigating any vulnerabilities that are out there. So that means penetration scanning. Make sure that you're also taking a look at your infrastructure to make sure that common vulnerabilities are closed. But then to regularly do that. So it's not a point in time, it's something that you have to really commit yourself to. And like I said, I'd also make sure that end users understood what they have to do in order to make sure that we remain secure. But beyond that, I would really make sure that we're putting enough money to it, which means that you have to pull from some other initiatives if they're not absolutely critical, and make sure that everyone understood exactly where we stood at any point in time in terms of cybersecurity. And what I mean by that is I'd make sure that you all were aware of what the results of those scans were, so that you understood when I came to make a request for funding what the impacts are of not moving forward with certain things, or so that we could collectively make a decision about what our cybersecurity posture is going to be.
Okay, are there any potential conflicts of interest of which we should be aware?
No, there aren't.
Okay, great. All righty. So are there any, Councilmember Albornoz?
Thank you. Enjoyed our conversation, Mr. Wright. As I said, I think this is an area where we will be able to find a great deal of efficiencies within county government, because there are so many different individual IT shops within departments, but also among agencies. And so I think this is an area that is ripe for looking at. The other area, as we discussed, that I hope we look at, we've been penny wise and pound foolish when it comes to IT. We'll often purchase the least expensive product that a software company may happen to have, or purchase a product that is at the very end of its life cycle that we then take on a contract for, and then find 2 years, just less than 2 years later, that the support staff isn't there to support the IT needs of the individual departments, and particularly with regards to hiring, that's been an issue. So, and IT, I'll be candid, is one of those issues that goes well above my head. And so as a former department head, I would rely heavily on my IT shop to advise me and our department on the needs. We were fortunate in our department to have a very strong IT infrastructure. But the folks we had on board had also been with us for a long time. And so I think this is an opportunity for us to look at new and emerging technologies and software platforms that will lead to greater efficiencies. And I look forward to working with you in your office on carrying those mandates out. Thanks.
Thank you. So in terms of those challenges, or the areas that you just identified, I think that we know which vendors we're going to be working with. We know that this is an Oracle government in some ways. We know that Microsoft is here. So to make sure that we stay on the cutting edge, or at least close to where they're planning to be, you have to have those regular conversations with your vendors, because they will tell you years out when something is going to be end of life, to make sure that we're aligned with where they're headed. In addition to that, I know that Montgomery County also has a partnership with Gartner, Gartner also says where industry is headed, so you have to make sure that you're leveraging those conversations. But in addition, the flow of information has to go backwards to them as well. So not just taking information from your vendors, but also providing information about where you plan to be in a few years, which means that you do have to look a few years out, and to make sure that there's clarity around not just what you plan on doing in terms of policy, but what you plan on doing in terms of technology, where the opportunities are. And make sure that you're talking to industry as well. Invite people that are interested in being IT partners with the county, and to say, okay, here's what we're planning on doing a few years from now. What do you think about that? And modifying your plans based on the feedback that you're getting. So as long as you have that feedback loop in place, you can plan for where industry is going to be headed and make sure that you're not installing obsolete software or software that's going to be obsolete in a few years. You're welcome.
Councilmember Reamer.
Thank you. Welcome, Mr. Wright.
Thank you.
One of the areas that we've shined over the last few years has been open data. The county has built a very, very strong open data program. We have a team devoted to it, and I think it's won a lot of awards. There's not a lot. I think we're right there in the same tier as the best cities in the country as far as breaking new ground and contributing nationally to the open data movement, and just so many implementations now. So I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about your philosophy around open data and how you might approach that here.
Sure. So Montgomery County, as you said, has a reputation of doing a great job. So I wouldn't do anything drastically different, but going back to the previous question, what I would do is make sure that any new system that comes in, also we're able to get the data out of that system. Because when you really take a look at making data-driven decisions, you have to have access to everything across the board and make sure that the associations are there. So I would make sure that any new system we put in place, if we were to move away from that vendor or platform, that there is verbiage in the agreement that we own the data. Yeah. So you have to make sure that those kinds of things are in place. You have to make sure that you're keeping your team up to speed in terms of their skill sets so that they're able to interact with the data. You have to make sure that you have people that can make sense of the data, which means that that's not necessarily a technical skill set, but an analytical skill set.
Right.
And, to make sure that the IT department is operating more as business partners. So historically, IT, we are, more focused on hard skills, what it means to be technical. But I think that it's critical to make sure that your IT department is developing soft skills because they understand the data, but how the data can relate to the business. So I'd put a lot more focus on that as well so that we can talk about what the possibilities are in terms of pulling data from respective systems so that we can assist with that. But like I said, the biggest thing is just to continue all of the great work that you've been doing so far.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Councilmember Hooker.
Thank you, Madam President. Mr. Wright, thanks so much for being here.
Thank you.
I wanted to ask you a little bit about your time at WSSC. I've heard it described, but you'll describe it more correctly than I will. Tell us about Cornerstone.
Yeah, so Project Cornerstone is we're putting in a new billing system. We're also putting in a new work asset management system and a mobile workforce management system. So obviously the billing system is going to be the primary interaction between WSSC and the ratepayers. The work asset management and mobile workforce management systems are really what we're doing to manage the assets, the pipes, and then the people that are responsible for supporting those assets, or if they get deployed to the field if a customer calls in. So we've made the decision to break that into two separate releases. The first release is really focused on customer to meter, and also our operational device management, how we manage the meters and mobile workforce management. That's going to go live on July 2nd. The second release is focused on work asset management. And so it has been a very challenging implementation. Reason being is because we made the decision to be our own implementer, which is never advised.
How was that decision made?
Yeah, I inherited that when I got there. That's never a good idea. Never a good idea. We're just not in the business of implementing.
Right.
So we've made it work, but it's been we've had to make some adjustments to make it work. which means that in some cases, we've probably spent a little more than we should have. There's redundancy in some roles. But we're at the point now where I think we do have a very good mixture of people and processes to be successful. So what we had to do is we had to bring in a new program manager for Release 1 and a program manager for Release 2. And those people were operating as if those are two separate implementations.
Okay.
So that if the second release doesn't go well, it doesn't pull down Release 1, which is obviously most critical.
Okay.
So you also know that we're going live with a new rate structure on July 1st.
Yeah.
That's being put into that's being put into the billing system. And in addition to that, we're going to be rolling out a new bill. So you have 3 things that are going to be going live at the very beginning of July. And I'm proud to say that the technology is working just fine at this point. Everything, we're doing parallel billing, testing in the old system and in the new system. And everything is exactly where it should be. So what we're focused on now is really making sure that the various departments that are going to be impacted directly by C2M know how to use the system. So we're training them in the system. So every day from 9 a.m. to 1 p.m., the people that are going to be working in the system are actually down there going through a number of different use cases and scenarios to make sure that they're familiar. We're accounting for the way that work is going to be different. We're calling those to-dos and seeing what the impact is going to be for those to-dos and making sure that there's staffing to support that. So that really is where the majority of our focus is right now. So we're on track to hit July 2nd.
Who's your main contractor on that?
So there is no main contractor on it. So it is an Oracle product, but we have a few different companies that are supporting us. So there are the 3, I'd say, main companies that are a part of the basic ordering agreement are Shore Power, Black & Veatch, and Origin. So we also have a company that's going to be supporting the system once that goes live, and that's Oakland Consulting.
Okay, thank you. When does Release 2 go live?
November 4th.
November 4th. And
Yes.
the first one's July 1st.
July 2nd.
July 2nd, sorry,
Yeah.
with contemporaneous with the billing system.
Yeah, absolutely.
What was the total spend on that?
So total spend so far has been about $30 million.
And, I mean, you inherited that decision, but
I did.
Most of it's been your baby since you've
Yes,
been there, right?
absolutely.
How will it go without you there now?
I'm
nervous about that.
Yeah, as I said, the technology is working. The technology is, we've already completed development. At this point, it really is a matter of organizational change management, making sure that the departments are up to speed, and that's not my responsibility. We have separate resources that are focused on that. So everything is still going to proceed without me there.
Okay, but the IT is going well so far.
It is.
But you
Absolutely.
haven't gone live yet, and go live isn't usually the hardest part compared to post-go live and implementation, right? Often has a lot of problems. So anyway,
It does.
I'm just,
And we do anticipate
I'm
that
not so
there are
worried
going to
about
be
us
challenges.
at the county. I'm a little nervous about WSSC that you won't be there to get it across the finish line.
Yeah. So I mean, I won't diminish my role in it. I mean, I do believe that it wouldn't have been successful if I were there. Just to be perfectly honest, I mean, I do have a lot of implementation experience that helped us to get to where we are today. But we do have a very experienced team. We've actually beefed up the team a bit in the past few months. We have the person who's supporting Release 1, Charles Suler, has actually done about 20 of these. So he has far more experience around billing systems than I do. So he is actually helping to put plans in place for things that could potentially go wrong once we go live. And in addition, if there are ever any questions, everyone has my phone number, my email address, and they know how to get in contact with me. But like I said, I do think that we're going, but I do think that we're going to be successful on July 2nd.
You do? Okay.
I do, absolutely I do.
All right. I might have to remind you. Okay,
Okay.
good.
Yeah.
But thank you. Appreciate the answers.
You're welcome.
Councilmember Rice.
Well, thank you very much, Madam President. So, Mr. Wright, I'm going to take that similar line of questioning, but I'm going to be less technical. One of the things as a former hiring manager in my previous career has been when I look at a resume and I see that the person hasn't been in a job that long. And so when I look at WSSC and here you're in the midst of a huge project, you haven't been there that long. You were you were there with Prince George's for much longer, for a total of 7 years.
I get a little bit concerned. And so why is it that you decided to leave in the midst of this huge rolling out of this project to come here to Montgomery County? So that's my first question.
That's a very good question. I appreciate that. So to be perfectly honest, and just to be transparent, which you'll see that I normally am, I've been working 12-hour days. I get to work at 6:30, and most of the time I'm still there at 6:30. And a question came from the Board of Commissioners not too long ago about burnout. And, I did get to the point where I was burned out because not only was I leading the implementation, but I was also responsible for the IT department, which is why I was working so much. So just at a personal level, I've coached track for 14 years. And this is the first year that I just have not been able to do that. So the prospect of coming to a county where, you have a very good reputation, where, I could, not burn out at the same rate, and to be able to innovate on top of some of the operations was very attractive. And what I mean by that is, with Prince George's County, when I got there, it was a very challenging environment. And what I mean by that is we were crashing in some way every single week. So for the first 2 years, I focused on just making sure we didn't crash. Then from there, it was a matter of making sure that we were starting to catch up because we were so far behind in terms of technology. That was another couple of years. And then you could gradually start to innovate on top of that. So I ran into the same environment at WSSC, where when I got there, we were crashing every week. So it got to the point where we weren't crashing anymore. In addition, we're putting this billing system in place, which is an extremely complex implementation. So that's where all of those hours were coming from. And it was, the way they were set up is, unfortunately, I was the only person who could do it. So it was long hours for me. The balance was gone. Like I said, not able to coach track anymore. And I think what sealed the deal for me is, so I have to brief the commissioners every month on the status of Project Cornerstone. So last briefing, I was there talking to the commissioners, and my cousin was being buried. I didn't go to his funeral, and not to say that they would have said, you can't go to the funeral, but just the fact that I felt like I couldn't. I knew it was time to make a change. So that's why I made the decision to leave WSSC, because of the workload and lack of balance.
And so my next question is, and thank you for that answer, you've stated a number of times that you feel as though Montgomery County finds itself in a good place. I've had my own concerns about where Montgomery County is when it comes to our technology services as a whole and where it is that we can go. So what do you feel you have to offer, and what do you see from the outside looking in terms of the vision? I've heard you talk about generically, but specifically, what are some of the things as a computer science grad who can follow some of what it is that you're looking to do to help change the system to keep us on par with other jurisdictions that are far ahead of where we are at this point?
Yeah, so one thing that I hear is coming to Montgomery County is a chief digital officer. And the way that I see that working is that person is going to be responsible for, the experience for citizens and other people that are stakeholders of the government. So I would make sure that, number one, that person has the tools that they need in place to be more innovative. That's the mobile application, the website, anything that you interact with digitally, or from your mobile phone. So I'd make sure that the infrastructure, number one, is reliable. In talking to different people with Montgomery County, I know that there are some opportunities around the network, and that's really where everything begins. But layering on top of that, making sure that we are replacing our infrastructure when it needs to be replaced, making sure that things are not crashing, which is what I've done even leading into here. So I'm not speaking about that in theory. These are things that I've actually done. So I'd also make sure that there was a lot more visibility into the health of the infrastructure. So what I would regularly do, and this is something that I've stated before, is document all of your infrastructure. I mean, you know, when you talk about a county this large, you're talking thousands of different devices, so that there is visibility into when something is expected to fail, when something is going to be end of life, when something is going to be end of support. And that way you can make informed decisions about where your funding is going to go. So that's number one. But then in addition to that, for all of the different services that IT offers, to make sure that there are clear service level agreements in place, and also make sure that you're aware of whether or not we're hitting those service level agreements. So, you know, sometimes IT gets a bad name, and, you know, rightfully so in a lot of cases, but then there are also times when the IT department is blamed for things that didn't necessarily occur. But what those service level agreements allow you to do is to see whether or not that's true, because you can see whether or not we're hitting those targets. And where we're not hitting those targets, make sure that we're applying the right resources or putting some enforcement mechanisms in place. In addition to that, something that I've done is make sure that each manager or team lead or resource in the IT department has clear goals and that they're tracked against those goals. So I do something called the cadence of accountability. And what that is each person is responsible for a couple of different things that they have to deliver on each year. And it's a yes or no question. Either you did it or you didn't. But every week they have to talk about what they're doing in support of delivering on that thing. So an example here could be, you know, with the phone system. You know, so the telecom manager has to improve the phone system. And by the end of the year, either they did it or they didn't. But each week they should be talking about something they're doing in support of making sure the phone system is more reliable. So you do that by functional area. And that way, not only can I see if people are hitting it, but so can you as well. But that's what I would do, just make sure that there's a lot more transparency into the IT operations here. And like I said, as you start to get to the point where things are stabilized, then you can start to do some of the more innovative things on top of that.
Okay. Thank you, Madam President.
Thank you. Councilmember Friedson.
Thank you, Madam President. And thank you, Mr. Wright. I appreciated the opportunity for us to sit down and talk. And I will say you've reiterated it here, but I appreciated your explanation to me of the different roles of the Chief Digital Officer and this role. It hadn't been made clear to me. I've asked a few times about how they would work, and it wasn't really entirely clear to me, but you explained it pretty well. It was, you know, to use kind of a restaurant, front of the house and back of the house, so to speak. Equally important roles, but different roles, and that clarified it a bit for me, and so I appreciate that explanation. I think it was really helpful for my understanding. I will say I do have some of the same concerns that were raised by Mr. Hucker and Mr. Rice before me, of the fact that we have this huge project that our same constituents who you'd be serving here are deeply relying on. We not only the capital investment that we've put in, which is largely from their pockets, but the fact that we're relying on this to make an improvement to a service that we desperately need and our residents desperately need. And so I am concerned about that. I appreciate your candor, the same candor you showed to me in our meeting, but I am a little concerned about the sentiment of one of the reasons why coming to a job is that you're burned out at your other job is concerning to me. Just, you know, to share your level of candor with mine, you know, that's not what I would normally want to hear from somebody coming into a new role, is that you were working on a huge project and you were burned out, and so you're coming to this role to try to avoid being burned out, although I do certainly appreciate and sincerely empathize for the situation with the funeral and to a work-life balance of, you know, wanting to have a commitment in your community to being involved and active, and, you know, with the coaching and other other areas. So I certainly appreciate it, but I would be remiss if I wasn't as candid with you as you've been with us to say that that's not exactly the most heartening sentiment that I would hear of a candidate for a job that I think, you know, should be extremely competitive and is crucially important to delivering the services that we have and to having government function the way that it must, particularly a government of our size with a scope and magnitude that our residents rely on a regular basis. I did just want to nail down a little bit on this, just so I can understand. I have been tangentially involved in a number of large projects in government, and I share the same comment that Mr. Hucker made, that usually it's not the planning for and the infrastructure side of it, it's the implementation side of it once you go live and immediately before you go live, where a lot of the craziness happens, and where the glitches get found, and where problems have to quickly be solved. And so I am a little bit concerned, just as a public official that who is representing constituents who are relying on that system, that the person who had been overseeing the project wouldn't be there on a day-to-day basis during that process. And just wanted to nail down a little bit, when would you be leaving WSSC and closing up with that project, and when would you be starting with the county in this new role, and how would that transition work?
Sure. So we haven't finalized our the start date. So I did commit to make sure that we were going live. I did commit that to WSSC. They've been asking for that. So I would still be involved in making sure that we're going to be successful there. So that's, we haven't set the start date just yet.
So is that July 2nd? Is that November 4th? What does go live mean?
So
since there's two
we're
phases to this
still
project?
working out, what's going to happen with release 2. To be honest, we still have some decisions to make there, but we committed to release 1. So to make sure that we were successful in release 1, which is by far the more important of the releases. So there are still some details that have to be finalized for release 2. To be honest, we're still really tightening up the scope and understanding what's going to have to be necessary for that to be successful. So I did commit to release 1. So in terms of the first question, and my answer, I could have said that better. It's not, so I'll take a step back, and it's not just the burnout. So when I got to WSSC, I went right into the middle of that implementation. So I didn't have the benefit of being able to stand back, plan, and to make sure that, I was getting the right people and resources into place, which contributed to the burnout. That was something that I did. It's not a matter of me not wanting to work hard. It's just that I did not take a step back to be successful coming into WSSC, which meant that I was in the middle of everything. I created that. So I've actually, had conversations with people about what I could do to be more successful, not just at WSSC, but everywhere else. And a lot of that starts with me. So to be honest, if I had the luxury of time to plan more effectively, I could have gotten more people involved in the implementation so that I wasn't the single point of failure. So for the 2.5 years that I've been at WSSC, that's exactly what I've been. But I'm to blame for that, because I didn't, so now it's gotten to the point where the people that are reporting to me, other people in WSSC, are playing a bigger part. But at the very beginning, that was not the case. But what happens is when you go in and you do that, you set a precedent where you're called to every meeting, where you're in the middle of every decision that's being made. And, coming into Montgomery County, I would have the benefit of being able to say that here's what we need to do in order to be successful, instead of me being the single point of failure. And, I think that long term, that really is not sustainable. And there is no way that anyone coming into Montgomery County with the complexity and size of this government can be the person that's doing everything. So that, coming in, I would make sure that my team was successful. I would see what the opportunities were and make sure that, going back to what I said before, everyone was accountable for delivering on a different part of that strategy. That's not really what I did at WSSC. Like I said, I was, just every decision went through me. Every project, I was in the middle of it. And, that's what burned me out. So it's not that I don't want to work hard. It's just that I need to make sure that the infrastructure is in place from the beginning for me to be successful.
I appreciate that. And Mr. Klein, have you or someone from the administration had conversations with WSSC to talk specifically about this project and to make sure that this is, going to be protected and that everybody is comfortable with the timeline of, starting sometime in July and that the project would not be jeopardized in any way?
Yeah, we've told Mr. Wright that we understand the need for him to be engaged with that project and ensure its success, and that we would be flexible in terms of the start date.
Yeah, I think it would be helpful to have direct communication as well with WSSC at the highest levels, just to make sure. I mean, this is a project that is important enough and that our residents are relying on enough, and that we've frankly invested enough money in, that I think it's important that, that be direct employer to employer, and not necessarily, there's a different dynamic of telling your employer that you may be leaving and, working out the timeline on that. Whereas, these are two, a government and a government agency, working through what is a significant project, just to make sure that we're not having a game of telephone and nothing's being lost in translation, and that everybody is on the same page, and that the interests of the taxpayers is first and foremost. And second to that is the timing of when folks are coming on board, and how we fill these positions, and the way in which we do it. I think that would make at least me personally feel more comfortable.
I can have that conversation.
Thank you very much.
All right, well, thank you very much for all of these answers. Obviously, this is a very important department for Montgomery County government. It's a very complex department, and there has a lot of work has been done to find ways, to get us to the next level. So this position is obviously very important, and I can tell by, of course, the questions of my colleagues, et cetera, that, we need to take this very seriously and ensure that that person that is in that role is the one that's going to take us to that next level. So we really do appreciate you coming over and answering all the questions.
Thank you.
So with that, we're going to move on to our last item of the day. We are going to now interview the county executive's appointee as Chief Labor Relations Officer, Mr. Steve Sluchansky. Good afternoon. All right, I'll turn it over to Mr. Klein.
Thank you, Madam President. Members of the council, I'm Andrew Klein, Chief Administrative Officer, and happy to introduce Steve Sluchansky as our nominee to be the first Chief Labor Relations Officer for Montgomery County. Steve is a champion of interest-based negotiation, which means getting beyond the positions that the sides take, and getting to the heart of the matter, and finding solutions that are that work for both sides. And he's been on both sides of the labor management relations, which gives him a unique perspective to bring to these discussions. He will lead us in addressing and resolving labor management issues proactively and engaging employees in new ways. Our goal is to foster a spirit of collaboration in delivering services more effectively and efficiently, and it'll be great to have Steve as a partner. Thank you.
All right. So, Mr. Sluchansky, we have some questions here, and then we'll open it up to a conversation with colleagues. So our first question is, what is your understanding of the mission of this new position, Chief Labor Relations Officer?
Thank you. First of all, let me express my appreciation for the opportunity to appear before you today. This is a new position that I would be occupying if approved, but let me point out that the work itself is not new. And in fact, I previously occupied a position where the work was substantively the same when I was the Deputy Director of the Office of Human Resources and the Manager for Labor and Employee Relations here in Montgomery County from 2011 to 2014. My understanding of the mission of this position is that the county's interests are properly represented in its relationships with the collective bargaining organizations, and that the program is administered fairly and effectively and appropriately. And not just the labor relations program, the collective bargaining relationships, but also the employee relations aspects of this program as well. Sometimes we tend to not put enough emphasis on that. And what I mean by that is that not just dealing with the issues that arise with non-bargaining unit employees, but also with issues around employee morale, productivity, motivation, things that any employer should be doing to address the concerns that raise in the workforce and how to raise productivity and morale within the workforce. My vision for this position is that we move in the direction of fostering and enhancing the collaborative and high-performing collective bargaining relationships that currently exist, that we build systems that effectively and expeditiously address conflict within the workforce, that we more fully engage employees, and that we increase the capacity of managers to carry out their role more effectively in regard to the employees and also the labor organizations. As I know it gets pointed out all the time, the workforce is our biggest investment. My understanding is about 80% of the budget goes towards the workforce. We want to achieve the greatest return on investment that we can achieve from the workforce. And by paying attention to the needs of the workforce and their representatives, their collective bargaining representatives, that we can maximize employee productivity and contribution to the county. That's essentially how I see the position.
Thank you. In your past, you have represented both unions and management. What lessons have you learned from both of those experiences, and how will they help you in this new role?
I have represented management extensively. As Mr. Klein pointed out, I've represented both unions and management at all different levels and in different contexts. I have considerable experience in an advocacy role, at representing management, both at the bargaining table, in grievance procedures, in administrative hearings, including collective bargaining agreement procedures that employees have in order to appeal various decisions that management makes, and also in non-advocacy roles in terms of conducting investigations, being a decision maker in various appeals procedures, investigating claims under anti-harassment policies and procedures, etc. This includes all aspects of representing management, whether it's conducting investigations, as I said, writing decisions, preparing management representatives for grievance hearings and other administrative processes, presenting management's positions and arguments before third parties and at various steps of grievance and appeals procedures, representing management at arbitration hearings, writing and reviewing grievance decisions and other decisions, and so on. I do want to stress that although I have been a management representative for some time now in all of these different procedures, that I try not to view my role. Sometimes I have to be in an advocacy role or decision-making role, but I try not to view my role as a us versus them approach. That is, I think as Mr. Klein was pointing out, my approach tends to be very much interest-based. Hopefully you're all familiar with that concept, in which we really try to get to the underlying causes of the issues, what the parties' interests are, and deal with that in a collaborative, productive way, not in an adversarial way. Sometimes you have to go adversarial, that does happen, but oftentimes litigation and conflict can be shortened by using approaches like interest-based approaches.
Please explain your understanding of your role as it relates to the council.
Well, let me say first of all that I see myself as being an employee of the government, Montgomery County government, which includes the legislative and the executive branch. And I certainly would like to see the council support as much as possible for the program, the initiatives that I would be undertaking. I understand that the council obviously has a very significant role as it relates to collective bargaining around the fiscal impact. We've recently seen the council exercise that role. Given the council's ultimate authority to approve or reject the collective bargaining agreements concerning the fiscal impact. But I'm very much interested in fostering communication between my office and the county council around the initiatives that we would be undertaking. in building collaborative relationships and systems. I'd like to be in contact with the council. I'd like to facilitate communications with the council and have that support, because again, the more that the council will support that, those programs and efforts, the more productive and effective they will be.
All right. Are there any potential conflicts of interest of which we should be aware?
No.
Okay, thank you. All right, Councilmember Friedson.
Thank you very much, and thank you. Unfortunately, we didn't get the chance to meet beforehand, so I have a question that I would have asked then, didn't have the opportunity, so I wanted to ask now. You certainly have quite a bit of background in both sides of the bargaining table, as Mr. Klein mentioned, which certainly appreciate and I think would serve well in this role. I know you worked previously for the county, and I guess after about a 5-year gap, are interested in returning. I'm just curious, what made you leave the county 5 years ago, and what interests you in coming back in this new role?
I very much appreciate that question. I had left an employer, actually technically retired from that employer in 2010. I had been with that employer a considerable period of time. I had an opportunity to come work for the county, which was exciting to me, quite frankly. I'm a longtime county resident. I've followed county politics, particularly collective bargaining politics, for a long time. I was somewhat familiar with the players from as an observer, but nonetheless, as a county resident, taxpayer. I had the opportunity to come to the county and do some things that I hadn't done before. I had not been in the public sector. This was my local jurisdiction that was seeking a position right in my line of work. I saw it as an opportunity to make a contribution to my community, and the opportunity to do some things that we had not done before, I had not done before. And in fact, in the time that I was here, we initiated a couple programs that, quite frankly, I think were groundbreaking. For example, we negotiated with McGeo a conflict facilitation process that was extraordinarily collaborative and interest-based, and was something that I feel had the potential to be culture changing in the county as far as how the county dealt with conflict at all levels. We began the implementation of that program, but I think, as you all know, in order for cultural change programs to be effective, they really need the robust support of the leadership of the county. For various reasons, I don't think that support was really there. And while the program did advance to some extent, it didn't become quite what I thought it would be. We brought interest-based bargaining to the county for the first time in some respects with McGeo, that we used what's called a modified traditional bargaining approach, which produced some what I think were innovative resolutions to some of the issues that the parties brought to the table. But after several years, I again was thinking about my future and what I wanted to be doing, and I made the decision to retire again. And I was retired for all of several months when my previous employer, before I came to Montgomery County, contacted me and asked me to return as the Associate Director of Human Resources and the Manager of Employee and Labor Relations. And once again, I thought that that presented an opportunity to do some things I hadn't done before. So I returned to them for several years. And last year, for the most part, enjoying retirement, I was given the opportunity to return to Montgomery County with an administration that I felt would be sympathetic to my approach of building collaborative relationships, interest-based relationships, and systems, and that would once again give me the opportunity to do some work that I really had not had the opportunity to truly do at the level that I wanted to do that. I couldn't pass that up. And again, being a county resident, this is my local jurisdiction, and the opportunity to make a contribution to the county and to my community, for me, is like a legacy issue. So it was very exciting, and it was something that I felt that I could not pass up. Sorry, that's a long
No, I
answer.
appreciate it. I grew up a big Michael Jordan fan, so I'm hopeful that there's two coming out of retirements and are as successful as Michael Jordan. I would just suggest with the PIO conversation we had before that if you can come up with a press release that is smart as David Falk's 2-word "he's back" or 3-word contraction, "he's back," which was the only one, then I'd be impressed. So, thank you for the answer.
You're welcome.
Councilmember Albornoz.
Thank you. For the benefit of my colleagues, Steve and I served together on the Labor Management Review Committee, and I was always impressed and appreciated the collaboration and partnership. I think that this is a promising best practice because I believe there are a number of issues that we can address further upstream before they do spiral out of control and turn into a grievance. And so I'm very optimistic. I also agree that more could have and should have been done to really launch the conflict facilitation process because it does have so much promise. There has to be buy-in from the county executive, but there also has to be buy-in from the department heads as well, and management in particular, because that's the only way that initiatives like that will truly work. So I look forward to supporting your nomination, Steve. I look forward to working with you again in this capacity because I think it will lead to some very productive and positive things. Thanks.
Thank you.
Councilmember Rice.
Well, thank you very much. My question is actually for Mr. Klein. Mr. Klein, what is the salary scale for this position?
I believe we told the council that let's see, we ended up 175, right? 170 salary.
Right, that's what you offered for this one, but I'm asking what the scale was for, like, what was the range that you were considering when you posted the position for the job?
I don't have that with me. I could
If you could
provide
forward
that for
that
the
to me,
council.
I'd appreciate it.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Councilmember Reamer.
Welcome back, Stephen. You're a familiar face from my first term. I was looking at the years of your service, 2011 to 2014. I think those were years when we had 0 compensation increases, 3 years in a row. No COLA, no step. Is that right?
Yes,
is that your recollection?
That's correct.
Any lessons? I'm sure there were many, but if I could ask you to reflect on that time for us in this moment.
That was a tough time, to be sure. It's difficult being in a position in collective bargaining when there's little in the way of fiscal resources to go around, because obviously that's critical for both sides, and certainly for employees, and certainly in terms of recognizing employees' contributions and wanting to reward them for their contributions. So that was a very difficult time. I will say that, again, and I really do appreciate the CAO's reference to my being a champion of interest-based, because I really am, and I've seen it successful in ways sometimes that's even shocked myself in bargaining and otherwise circumstances. I do think that some of the challenges that we face, if good, effective, robust, interest-based practices are applied to some of those, we might surprise ourselves with some of the solutions we come up with, even in terms of fiscal solutions. It takes a real commitment to do that. You don't just start a process like that and expect it to produce outstanding results. It does take some commitment, it takes some trust, it takes building relationships. But I think that even in that period, if we had been at that point in the relationships, we might have come up with some solutions that maybe would have benefited the county, would have had the employees in a better place and the labor organizations in a better place than they were at the time. I still think that, again, we were able to accomplish a lot in that period, and we did move an agenda of implementing some systems that were more productive, more effective at shortening conflict, avoiding litigation, which obviously there are fiscal impacts around avoiding litigation, addressing grievances more efficiently, effectively, dealing with backlogs. But I think we could have gone a lot further.
Thanks.
Councilmember Hucker.
Thank you, Madam President. Just real quickly, Mr. Sluchansky, I'm just glad you're willing to come back, glad you're willing to take this on. This is going to be sort of an experiment for the county as well as for you. And I think with both your county experience and your experience on the management side and the employee side, you're very much the right person for the job. I think certainly since I've been here and since I've been paying attention before I was on the council, it always felt like our labor relations were needlessly dramatic and adversarial, and not interest-based in many cases, like you said, and often resulted in costly litigation and grievances and a lot of bad feelings when that's, in many cases avoidable. And I'm optimistic about your ability to take us in a more productive direction in the future. So I'm glad you're willing to take this on. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, I don't see any other lights. So, Mr. Sluchansky, we look forward to this appointment and really do thank you for stepping up again and being, your willingness to work in this particular space.
Thank you.
So with that, we are adjourned. Thank you.